We are live, and today we're going to talk about Are We in a World War III Part 2? Are we already there? The reason why we need to talk about that as investors is to calculate the dip, right? Are we going to have a long dip? How long is it going to last? And let's get into it, guys. A very interesting show. I have a lot of content ready for you. Let's get into it.
Hey, yeah. It's all about wealth engineering. Might be something that you're not used to. It's okay, cause I'm here to introduce you to concepts. Time to grow and make big moves. All about crypto, come see. Stocks and business, yes indeed. Got the info that you need. Hosted by my homie JC. Hey, yeah. Wealth engineering. Stacking and stacking it up. It's time to generate wealth. Till you living like Scrooge McDuck. Hey, wealth engineering. It's time to show you the game. Till you living like Richie Rich. Till you ballin' like Bruce Wayne. Hey, you ain't gotta be an expert, no problem. It don't really matter where you at, just start it. It'll take time, hard work, and
What's up? What's up, guys? This is JC, and welcome to the Wealth Engineering Podcast. This is where I create content so that you can learn how to make, keep, and multiply money for the purpose of building generational wealth and retiring early. Now, if we're talking about building generational wealth, you need to understand how the days and years and next decades are going along. And if we have a World War III in our hands, this is definitely going to affect our health on the long terms, wealth in the long terms. And we need to take care of that. We need to pay attention to that. And we need to plan so that we can actually benefit from this as opposed to being suffering from this, right? You've seen the gas prices lately. You've seen how high they're going for, and this is just the beginning. We're technically having an economic winter starting already, and if we are heading towards a World War III, then this is just the beginning. We could get it worse, higher price on gas, which will lead to a higher price on everything else. But the question is, are we already? Did we already start World War III? So we're going to explore this idea today in today's content. I have a lot of videos ready for you. We're going to have some video reactions. You see me with my headphones and my new setup. So we're going to get into it, and I'm very excited, guys. Very excited. Lots of content to go talk about. But first, let me do some house cleaning stuff already. So I created a new channel on Telegram. So the link will be in the description below. Make sure you check it out. Also, guys, I started with I donated. I not partner yet. I'm working on a partnership with the foundation, but basically, I want to start promoting a foundation too. But it's not just about making money, right? It's also about giving it, right? The more you give, the more you receive. I actually truly believe that, and one of the way you can give that is to give to foundation. So I'm working on different things behind the scenes on what I can do for foundation. But at least if you want to support me as well on this, I have a link in the description below, and you can join with me as I donate to foundations that I care about. Maybe you can join to donate as well, or if you want to select your own foundation, that's perfect as well. As long as you're giving, that's what matters. So with that said, guys, let's get into it, guys. We're going to talk about a couple things today. Basically, are we in a World War III? I've already made a stream about this a couple days ago, so we're going to explore more details about that today. We talked about, I'm going to be talking about a little bit of history of how did we get here, right? Because for most people, they don't really hear about what happened. All of a sudden, you hear about a war with Ukraine and Russia. So we're going to do like a quick history just so that we can catch up on what's happening right now. And then we're also going to talk about some videos that I have ready for you on the other side of the news that most people are not exposed to. Because especially if you're on the west side of the world, you are the all the media is basically biased in a way, and for you to really be educating yourself and being informed, you need to expose yourself to somewhere else, another type of media which is trying to be as impartial and as unbiased as possible. And then I have found some clips for you today, which is why I have my headphones here. We're going to talk about it today, And also I see some of you are coming in. Make sure you hit the like button as you come in, and say how you can say hi also in the comment section. I would love to see that. But yes, guys, also that's what we're going to talk about today. And we also going to be I'll be sharing with you some videos where experts are talking about the situation going on, and see what we can learn from this. And the signs were there. The signs were there years ago, but it seems that they were unnoticed by the people leading the United States, maybe, or the Western societies. The signs were there, but they were just being disregarded, leading to this situation right now. And right now, one of the situation that happened is this. The war that you're currently seeing with Russia and Ukraine could escalate very quickly into a World War III. I believe we're already in it, but we're actually going to pull or show you some pieces there, and talk about all the parties involved in these. And the reason why, again, we care about that, I know I made a lot of videos about that, either in my shorts or either in my YouTube channel, but it's really because as investors we need to be aware of all that. If we're not understanding the uncontrollable forces that can affect our wealth, then we don't see that coming. The question, for example, is it a good time right now to buy the dip, right? As an investors, your reaction, your reflection might be, it's a dip, let's go buy it. But what if we just started the deeping, right? What if this deep is just the beginning and it could actually be a huge fall, right? So we don't know. And one of the key factors that can determine if it's just a normal dip, if it's just a market correction, if it's a recession starting, or even a global depression, it's going to be what's currently happening right now on a global scale. So that's why it's important to be aware and to observe and to understand the component in all these factors, to understand how that could affect your portfolio, how that could affect your jobs, paying groceries, rising expenses. So maybe that could help you plan ahead. And that's why we're making these videos. It's not really to make a doomsday scenario. That's not what I'm here for. It's more for solutions and educational, right? And educational, entertaining, and so on. So we're going to be talking about all that. And after, lastly, we're going to be talking about the alliance that is secretly being formed, or that right before our eyes, but we the alliance of war. It seems that every world war have alliances being made between countries that don't necessarily see eye to eye with each other, but for the sake of wars, they always put aside their differences, and work towards the common goal. And in today's video, we're going to talk about all that today, because there's the alliance is being formed. And one of the last key point I'll be talking about today is what will India do? Right? India is not really engaged in this war right now. It's not even a war yet that is really pulling um, uh, China right now or India. But eventually, if we're heading there, they will be pulled into it. And the question is, what will India do? But when it comes to Russia, when it comes to China, I think the signs are here. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, I have some interesting videos to show you today. And then again, Saudi Arabia, why do we care about that? Well, they control a larger supply of oil. And I'm pretty sure you've seen the price of oil, which will lead the price rising of everything else. So we got to care about that now, right? So without further ado, I'll get started with the video reactions I have ready for you. But first, let me say hello to Wally. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. And also Karen tuning in. Happy to see you here. Hope you stay along. We'll have some interesting topics to talk about tonight. And let's get into it, guys. Let's get into it. And also make sure you hit the like button. I can't really see the like button right now, but I'm sure if you're here, you can hit the like button or tickle the like button a little bit, just just a little bit. And it really helps with the algorithm, guys. It really helps so that we can get more people here and see what we're doing here. All right. So without further ado, let me share with you my screen. And the first video I wanted to start with, guys, it's kind of like a video that shows the top 10 countries by military spending from the year 1870 all the way to 2020. All right, make sure I like this because I love this video right here. It has a nice background here that you can listen to but I won't play the sound. And one of the reasons why I'm going to let this video play out as I talk is I want to show you guys what happened in empires. Now, very quickly, I made a stream earlier. Was it last Sunday? We talked about the rise and fall of empires, and this video right here can actually shows you the as the empire rise, they're going to have more increase in their military, and as they fall, they're going to have a lot less with that, right? So this is also a beautiful timeline. It goes less than 200 years, but it still gives you kind of like how what was happening in terms of spending, and you could see the correlation that with the rise of an empire. So basically, 1870, the United States is fresh as a country. It's pretty low in military spending, whereas the powers of the world, France, British, and German Empire are rising, right? So right there, whenever you see the whenever you see them fighting like this, that could also often lead to a war. And you've seen how long this has been lasting, and I think it's all that it's been leading to World War I, right? You see 1981, by the time you reach 1914, then that's going to lead eventually to a World War I. Again, what are we doing that for? Is because we're trying to understand what happened in the past, so that we can understand better what's going to happen in the future. So it's this video is playing beautifully right there. You can see that, hey, United States is really increasing their spending. United Kingdom as well, very close to the First World War date as we're approaching. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, there you go, increase the speed and watch this in 2x. Look at that. Look at the Empire of Japan. Oh, is that too fast? It's basically the top five countries that are really spending a lot of money on military, but also you could see these were the countries that were involved in the First World War, right? So now we're very close to the First World War, 1914, boom, and there you go. Germany, United Kingdom, France, Russia, and everyone else, and see how fast the United States joined the war, right? Very towards the end, they rose their military spending, and right then they were already started to be in the discussion for the New World Order, right there around these times, right? And then you had Germany. So very interesting thing that happened around this date. 1920s, you had the marks, right, with the currency of the marks. After the World War III, Germany did not. You even had it here. They even changed the name, right? It was the German Empire, and I think you're going to see it very clearly. And in yellow, I think it's fall, and then right there, you're going to see in yellow. I'm going to let it play right there. Weimar Republic, same flag as the Germans. So this era, it was I guess powerful, but at the same time it fall very quick. It's still Germany, just a different name, Weimar Republic instead of the German Empire, but it fell very quick. And in this is something I recommend you guys to look into because of what happened with their currency, right? They had the currency called the marks, the German people of Weimar and the marks. You need to research that because what happened with the marks is kind of an extreme version of what can happen with a fiat currency, but this is something that could happen to the U.S. dollar. And understanding that pattern, it was the same pattern as the Romans Empire. It was the same pattern as the Weimar Republic people, and to understand that pattern on how the currency was devalued, how the currency led to a lot of wealth being taken away from the people when these times were very rough, right? Late 2000, late 19, beginning of 1900s, 1920s, leading to 1930s. These are the times that Mr. Funny Mustache was growing, right? So these are the times that led to the rise of Mr. Funny Mustache, that I'm not even allowed to say his name. And also something else very interesting that happened around this time is the birth of the Soviet Union, right? So this is going to be key because we're still living in that. You see, in 1918, after the First World War I, There was none of that here. You don't even see Russia, barely anything. But there is many countries that they wanted to align with. USSR after became Russian grew, and then they created USSR right after. You see the boom, 1920 and then you will see the Weimar people rise and fall very quick, and then after it's going to start again in Germany. But so a very quick note on the effect of, you see China right here rising and how small it is compared to the big ones. Very interesting, very interesting. But the Soviet Union was for a very long time a very powerful entity, right? But look how fast the Nazi, and I don't know if you noticed, it was the Weimar people that switched into the Nazi people, right? So you know who was the leader of that. And but towards the end of the World War II, that's when United States came into the rescue, formed the alliance, and destroyed this party right here. And then now it's going to be back into Germany, and then USSR and USA. It's still kicking, but China is rising slowly, forming what we're going to know now as what is still the China that we're going to know now. But for a very long time, especially after the wars, the USSR was weakened, right? But over time, they're slowly getting their strength back, and that's eventually going to create conflicts because now you have a rising empire who's already working towards building his reserve currency, which will be the world reserve currency, and then versus the previous empire that kicked out the Mr. Funny Mustache people. We see also Canada rising slowly here, but for a very long time, Soviet and US was kind of like battling heads, right? It wasn't necessarily a direct war, but it was pretty much in terms of the tensions were there, and it's all that tension that's going to lead to what we are known as the Cold War. And the United States was also involved in other type of war like Vietnam, for example. So all that going on, and leading to modern times right now, 1985, 1986, when I was born. You know, USSR was still kicking, but in 1991, it was the fall of the Soviet Union right here. Bow. Soviet Union fell and then it became Russia. So Russia was severely weakened after this. It's separated in many different countries. You had the Russian mainland, and then you had a bunch of other countries like Ukraine, for example, like the Slavic countries like Poland. So all of these break away from the USSR, and then they made their own country, the independence. They declared their independence in a way. But so now, for a very long time now, United States have been king, dominating the world. But look who's rising slowly, right? We're getting close to 2020, and China is rising slowly. Russia is still trying to be in the top three, and slowly, as we're moving forward, look how fast China is rising, right? So, although the war is happening with Russia right now, which is a former shell of itself with the USSR, the real threat right now is really with China, because China is the rising empire. And you can see in terms of military spending, they're nowhere close to what the United States can do. But just like we've seen in the past, right, with the USSR alliance that was really competing on a military level with the United States. What if there was another type of alliance in the East, right? What if there was an alliance between China and Russia, or even adding other countries like Iran, and all of these countries have nukes, right? So imagine the number of nukes that they will have in compared to United States and other countries in Europe. And then let me ask you this: what would India do, right? Because India is part of the East as well, right in between Russia and China. So what would India do? Going to be an interesting question. But before we even get there, is we need to understand is right now, in a good scenario, what's going to happen is the sanctions have affected Russia so much that even on a good day, let's say we would stop everything right now, we're heading towards a recession, right? We were already on a risky market. We had just come out of the CV-19 lockdowns, right? The world just started to do business again, and all the money that was printed globally, not just in the US, but globally, is going to was doomed to create inflation anyway. We were already seeing inflation number rising, but then on top of that, with what's been happening in the last 3 weeks in Europe, is definitely aggressively approaching us to that recession way faster than anticipated, right? So that's why you got to understand what's going on right now, and start making plans, because things are happening way faster than anticipated. So the other points I wanted to mention so far, is everything okay? Let me know in the chats if I'm going too fast, or if you have any questions. Let me know. I see five of you are here. Thank you very much for your support, and we'll get into it, guys. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention today is the importance of good media. Now, when you are in a democracy, you need the fourth estate, which is the media, right? The media is going to talk to you about what you need to know, what the government is doing, and usually they don't take sides, right? It's supposed to be unbiased, impartial, just give you the news, keeping the population informed. But for a very long time now, we're seeing sides being made in the media, and it's not necessarily a good thing, because there is a side of the information that we don't get. And when we go towards war, as history has shown us, that the media has always been used as a way for propaganda, right? For propaganda, and not necessarily to tell you exactly how things are. Now you have one side giving them, propaganda on the left side, propaganda on the right side. And then if you really want to know what's going on, you kind of have to be in the middle, but try to take information from both sides, and hopefully you can be aware and take and be measurements. But let me give you an example, right? Let's say between Fox and CNN, they both have different views in terms on how they approach the news, correct? But because they are in the West, technically they are still on the same side. So for example, one of them might say Biden is doing a great job on how he's approaching its a foreign policy, and then Fox might say Biden is doing a crappy job on how it's approaching its foreign policy. But what they both might not say is maybe there is a different side to what Putin is doing that we don't understand. Instead, both of them will be saying, "Hey, Putin is the devil. We need to eradicate him off the earth. He has no merit. Whatever he says, we don't want to hear about it. It's unacceptable, right?" But from another side, if that's all you listen to, then your conclusion will be, "Hey, you know, Putin is evil," without knowing much, just knowing what the media is saying on one side. But if you go on the other side, you might have a total different story. It doesn't mean Russian people are approving 100% on what's going on in Ukraine, but they're kind of more understanding why Putin is doing what he's doing, which is surprising. Then you might be understand, why would they even consider that? Why would they even think about um, uh, like like sympathizing with the devil in a way, right? Why would they do that? So, and that's where I'm saying the importance of the media is key, because maybe they know something that you may not be aware of, you may not be exposed of, and therefore you didn't pay attention to it, and you cannot come up with the same conclusion as they do. Maybe that's it. So what is the best way to tackle that is really to expose yourself to different types of news from different countries. If you have to, try to find a place where they can be unbiased and impartial as possible. And for me, this source of news is international. And you know me, right? Shout out to my lady, Palki Sharma. Palki Sharma here from the Weon station. So that's not the only news I listen to, but for the purpose of this video today, that's what I'm going to share with you. And I wanted to do a video reaction in this, because I think there is a lot to learn from the videos I have ready for you. But I can't wait to get into this, because this video, I just love the way she presents the news. Very blunt, very straightforward. She doesn't smile, and she's still pretty. And man, the she gets into them. She grill everyone, and that's what I love it. And that's what the media is supposed to do. When I was young, that's what I saw. I noticed in the media. That's what the media was in my country. Now it's only. I'm just happy to see that there are people still trying to be as close to what journalism is supposed to be. With that said, let me play this. And just before I do, I think you have a thing for that lady. Hey, man. When I hear her talk, I think I'm starting to. I think I'm starting to have a thing for her. But with that said, let's get into it.
To every story, consider both before you form an opinion. Easier said than done. They say there are two sides to every story. Consider both before you form an opinion. Easier said than done. Look at the conflict in Ukraine. One side is dominating the global narrative. The other side has been proclaimed the villain. I'm talking about NATO and Russia. And while there's a solid case against Russia here, this story too has another side. And as a
Exactly, guys. That's what I'm saying. There is always a side to two stories, and he doesn't mean both sides are right. He doesn't mean both sides are wrong. He just needs that, hey, so that you can understand the full picture, it's better to understand at least hear the two sides and then form a conclusion. But the conclusion that we really care about is not who's right, who's wrong, right? This we're going to leave that to whoever has the moral authority. For us, we need to understand who's right, who's wrong. Just for that, we don't really care about who's right, who's wrong. We just need to understand what's going on, because if two sides believe they're both right, that's eventually will lead to war, right? And that's from that perspective. This is where we're going to talk about it. Let me see very quickly. I see some question here. Harvey Williams, how are you doing? How are you doing? Have you seen any videos from Gonzalo Lira on YouTube recently? No, sorry, I haven't seen. Maybe I'll check it out later. There are three different sites. There are three sides to all stories in actuality. Yeah, what's the third side? The medium, the middle side, left, right, and what's the third side? Let me know in the comment. All right, let's continue to listen to this again. Exactly, that's a good thing. You need to listen to at least the two sides and form your own opinion.
Of the story, we must dwell on and reflect it. Vladimir Putin's aggression is being called out, and rightly so. Invading a sovereign country cannot be justified. But what led the world to the point of this invasion? Leaders in Moscow say they are the aggrieved party. They are the victims of NATO's eastward march, and they're only acting in self-defense.
Well, that's do I agree with this? Do I disagree with this? That's not my concern. I care about the money. But that's what I'm saying, guys. In a war situation, both parties believe they are right. So they all will come up with their own philosophy. Now, what we're going to try to do here is is the Russian tanks they are right? That's what we want to hear, because we haven't seen that in our media here, in the Western media. We only hear that, hey, Putin is wrong. He's not supposed to do what he's doing. But my question to you is, why is Putin feels like he is doing self-defense here? Why does he feel he is right?
Here's why. Over the past 25 years, NATO has been creeping closer to the Russian border. Former Soviet states have become NATO members. This military alliance has technically absorbed the entire security belt of Moscow.
So, very interesting point here, and I think we're going to develop that later as we move forward. But one of the things that happened, guys, when USSR broke out is because there were lots of guns. There was a lots of nuclears here. There was, I think, at some point there was maybe 30 countries with nukes. So nukes are not good for the environment. Probably not good for the entire Earth. One nukes can probably lead to our extinction as a race. So it's not good for anyone. I mean, maybe not, right? Let's put it this way. The nukes in the 50s versus the nukes we have now, it's world apart, okay? So one nuke, anyway, I don't even want to go into the science of nuke. That's not the point. But the point is, USSR had to make an agreement with the Western societies, the Western world, on how they were going to, remove as many nukes as possible. Ukraine was basically at the heart of that. NATO was formed as a way to control USSR/Russian aggression in trying to invade other countries. And basically, after the USSR broke out, they lost. They basically said, you know what, we're not really in a rush to make a war right now. As long as you guys keep your end of the deals, we are okay, right? And what was that deal is we do not want uh, any how do you say that expansion of NATO. You are here. NATO is in blue, right? Blue, this is where you are. Stay where you are. I don't want you guys to get closer to me. And that's what they're saying. He's saying that, hey, if you get closer to me, we will be considering that as a direct aggression, as a direct threat, and that could lead to war. They were saying that, guys, since in the early 90s. That's what they were saying. And for the most part, it was understood that, hey, we don't need to expand anyway. Fine. But as we're getting closer with Bill Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, this is where we're
This
heading
military
towards
alliance
more
has
and more.
technically absorbed the entire security belt.
This is where this map is getting more and more bigger, right? They're trying to influence the countries that are a lot closer to Russia to be part of NATO, right? Which, remember, guys, part of the deal of getting rid of my nukes, of not aggressing anyone else, is stay where you are. So that already was a threat to a power that has lots of nukes, right? Remember, I showed you that video earlier, how long these guys were leading in terms of military spending. So they were always in conflict with the West, and they don't see eye to eye. They don't want their culture to be influenced in any way by them, and they're like, stay away, right? Stay away.
Of Moscow. Russia sees this expansion as a provocation. It hurts their security interests and won't end well for both sides, they said. The warnings were clear. NATO ignored them. Call it their myopia or arrogance. They downplayed Moscow's concerns, kept proceeding with new rounds of expansion until things blew up in Ukraine.
So again, that's another point, right? And the way, I mean, she's really summarizing about 14 years of foreign policies, but you can actually capture, and I'll show you that later. You can actually hear what the way American was talking about Russian back then, right? And again, when you are at the top of the world, when you have all the nukes, when you have like the world reserve currency, it's kind of like your own rule, right? For survivor of the fittest, you just beat these guys. USSR broke. You don't, if you see them as kids, but they have nukes too. But it's a very important to understand that if you're not listening to the other party, you downplay what they're saying, you think of them as, hey, son, silence, you don't know what you're talking about. Eventually that builds up, right? Eventually that builds up to a point where they just don't care anymore, right?
Kept proceeding with new rounds of expansion until things blew up in Ukraine. Did NATO push Ukraine into this war? Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and today I want to discuss why NATO cannot escape the blame for what's unfolding in Ukraine. First things first, what is NATO? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a security...
You see, right then and there, that's what I'm expecting from the media, guys. I want to drive this point across because I don't even watch TV anymore because of this reason. I don't care if it's on the US, India, or Europe. I just want, or Haiti, basically. I just want a media that's going to keep its government, its people accountable. Accountable. And when you hear someone like this, no smile, straight to the point, telling you that, hey, maybe NATO is to blame in this, right? This is what I would love to hear. Why? Why is NATO is to blame to this, right? Because for the most part, if you actually listen to this channel, they're actually in favor of the West. They kind of lean towards more on the West side. But even them, they try to put themselves back in the center and be like, okay, so let's hear the other side, right? Let's and that right there, guys, it's real journalism. That right there is, this is an art that I wish we had, but this can change your perception so much when you hear both parties as opposed to one side. It's going to keep you more informed, more educated, and as an investor, it really gives you a better picture of where things are heading, because now you understand both sides. It's easier for you to see the scale of that conflicts as opposed to just listening to media telling you that, hey, things will be all right, or maybe the president will be, don't worry, everything will be all right. but we know politicians lies, right? Before we move any further, just very quickly, let me go very to the chat. Side one, side two, and the truth. Salute, Simpson. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, so side two, maybe telling the truth. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see. We'll get into it. I got to see you showcasing your critical thinking skills on all of these issues, brother. Thank you very much, Harvey. And let me see. Salute to the chat. Salute to you, Need Watches. And let's get into it, guys. And make sure you hit the like button as you come in.
Alliance between North America and Europe. It was formed after the Second World War. The goal, they say, was to protect democratic freedom. On the 4th of April 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty was signed. This treaty was simply an anti-Soviet accord aimed at countering any future aggression by the USSR. It established a new balance of power.
Guys, very important point. Right from its inception, the NATO was automatically anti-Soviet, which in modern times it means anti-Russia. So you see the problem here. So when USSR / Russia is asking people, do not get other countries in NATO that are, especially the countries that are closer to us. I mean, are they wrong here? I mean, why would you want your anti-Soviet means opponent, right? Means your enemies, right? So would you want your enemies to be right next to your door? I mean, I'm not trying to play favoritism here, but we got to understand where this is coming from. This is right after the World War II, where USSR was still big. Remember, we were playing this video right here, right? So if we were putting it in 1949, right? We can put it around 1949. There you go. So this is where, around that time right here, this is when NATO was formed, 2 years after this date, right? 1949. But look who was dominating in power in terms of military spending, in terms of military force. It was the USSR. So I guess the NATO countries were like, well, we can't let this happen. These guys are pretty aggressive. Let's just form this unity, NATO, and let's try to compete with these guys. At least let's be on the same military stand on what they can do, and also area, right? It's not just the military part, because the US had that covered. It's also on area. It's also a subtle way of conquering an area without actually having to spend the missile and the money and the resources, logistic to acquire it, right? It's actually a very smart and modern way of conquering new countries via the democracy, right? But very important to keep that in mind. From its inception, it was already anti-Soviet / anti-Russia. So if Russia is making a deal to help the world live in peace after Cold War, after tensions, and every party agrees that nukes is not the way to go, and they're asking you, the only thing we want in reserve is don't expand your countries close to us, especially countries in our borders. It's deal making here. But let's listen.
At countering any future aggression by the USSR. It established a new balance of power in Europe. It promised all members collective security. That's a core principle laid out in Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. It obliges member states to protect each other in case of a war. It says an armed attack against one ally will be an attack on all allies, meaning if one NATO nation is attacked, all NATO nations will retaliate.
So I don't know if you guys knew that about the NATO principles, but that's basically the main key of it, right? If one nation gets attacked, all nations get attacked. There's about 30 countries right now on part of NATO, and these countries are getting closer and closer to the borders of Russia. Meaning, if there is any issues here with the countries near the border of Russia, and they cannot attack it, because now if they do attack it, they're going to have all the might of the world power at their doorsteps. And right then and there, this is aggression, right? They feel threatened by that.
This allowed NATO members to pool and share their military resources. They built efficient defense capabilities, but there was more to NATO than just defense. It was an alliance of liberal countries, an engine of democratization that was supposed to promote common values and interests, also push back against the rise of communism. Naturally,
Again, pushback against communism means pushback against Russia and China, basically, right? So, in a way, they're kind of forcing Russia to deal with China, and that's not a good move because China is another beast in this battle here.
Moscow saw this alliance as a threat to its interests. In response, it created the Warsaw Pact in the year 1955. It was a counterweight to NATO, the Warsaw Pact. These were the members. Their goal was the same. If one Warsaw Pact member is attacked.
Now, here's an interesting chart, and that's going to play a factor later. East Germany, because Germany is a NATO country, right? But back then, East Germany was part of the USSR. Poland was, and if I'm not mistaken, Poland is also a NATO country. What is Bulgaria right now? I think Ukraine is somewhere here. And so Ukraine was not part of that pact, but hey, they had a lot of guns. After USSR, they had the second place in terms of nukes and missiles and military power and all that. But a lot of these countries are now NATO, all right, which is getting closer to what is now Russia.
All others will defend it. In Russian historical memory, there were 5 reasons why such a pact was justified, 5 major invasions when the West threatened Russian interests. This includes the Polish occupation of the Kremlin in early 17th century, the Swedish invasion of Russia in early 18th century, the Napoleon invasion of the 19th century, and the 2 wars with Germany in the 20th century. In each case, the very essence of the Russian state was threatened. So suspicion and fear of the West took deep roots in Russia. Moscow began perceiving NATO as a tool of American imperialism.
Very key point right here. So, she said it again. Let's listen to what the last sentence she said, because that's going to go unnoticed. But it's there is a lot to uncover just from that sentence alone.
Took deep roots in Russia. Moscow began perceiving NATO as a tool of American imperialism.
Moscow began to perceive NATO as American imperialism. Back in the old days, if you wanted to conquer a country, right, slash Alexander the Great style, you would just slash everyone, right, kill all the men, and then Genghis style, all you know what, history, right? I don't even have to go to the details. But now we're in the 21st century. We are modern men, right? We are modern people. How do we invade a country? Well, through democracy, right? You give the illusion of choice to the people, use the media to do so, and then you get them to the poll where they can select between party person A or person B, which both report to you anyway. You control that. You can put a puppet, and we're going to get into about the puppet situation here very later. But that would be, and if you control the leader of that country, then essentially you control all the resources, you control their actions, especially their military reaction, right? So although it's not a direct invasion of the country, it's actually a lot cheaper way of doing it, because you don't have to spend your own money to do it. You just control the country from far, and they still respond to you, right? They're still operating under the flag of US without being a US territory, right? So it's kind of like that's what they're perceiving it at. And me, I can tell you guys, I grew up in a country, Haiti, where that's everything that she's talking about right now was tried on my country first. Maybe not first, but we understand exactly what when the US hires the puppets to be in governments, what that can be like, right? It's they use corruption to the benefit, and when you use corruption to your benefit like that, you can control a country for cheap without invading it, and extract all the resources you need, put your army in there to impose your will, and the puppet in power will let it play. And that's what Russia is afraid of, especially in Ukraine. There's a lot of corruption here. And this sentence that she mentioned here, right there, trust me when I say this, it is not just unfounded a feeling from Russia. It is based on what previously United States has done in the past when they were able to enforce democracy on a country, right?
Took deep roots in Russia. Moscow began perceiving NATO as a tool of American imperialism. And the assessment was not really off the mark. In 1989, the Berlin Wall collapsed. In 1991, the Soviet Union disintegrated and the Iron Curtain was completely demolished. Europe's regional order hinged on one question: should Germany align itself with the US and NATO, or should it join the Russians through the Warsaw Pact? The US government, under George H.W. Bush, made an offer to Russian President Mikhail Gorbachev. It suggested if Germany became a NATO member, NATO would stop expanding, not 1 inch eastwards. No new member.
Mm. And again, this is a big play for the United States. By the way, this is a beautiful play from the United States to actually get Germany as part of the NATO, because now Germany is the biggest country in, when I say biggest, more in terms of economic power, right? In terms of economic power, Russia and Germany are pretty up there, and I would argue Germany is probably bigger than Russia, but energy-wise, maybe not, right? So so removing that from the end of Russia is going to seriously affect their potential to rise as an empire. So that was a good play from whoever was in power. It's probably Bush that was in power back then, Bush Senior. But that was a great play for them in terms of ensuring your sovereignty and the rise of the empire. Um, Definitely agree with that. But the the problem with that is after they secure that benefit, they say, hey, we're not going to expand, and therefore you should get rid of your guns. We're going to keep all of our guns, but we're not going to expand. That's the deal they're putting up to the table. But now that these guys are clearing their guns, and then you're like, well, we're still powerful. Let's just do whatever we can because we're the empire of the world, right?
Members. Today, the US says it made no such promise, that no such deal was ever struck, but hundreds of memos, meeting minutes, and transcripts from US archives indicate otherwise. Nevertheless, Moscow bought the offer. It demolished the Warsaw Pact in the hope that the West would follow suit, that NATO too would be dissolved. But that never happened. The West would follow.
Guys,
Nevertheless, Moscow bought the offer. It demolished the Warsaw.
Look right here. The demolish the Warsaw Pact means all these countries like Poland, for example, now Bulgaria and all that were attached to the USSR now are free for grab. And then over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, these are the countries that are now part of NATO. Do you see the problem here? First, they say no expansion. So maybe they could have stopped right there and leave all this country being neutral. That would have been a great way to settle this, right? We wouldn't be talking about World War III right now. But now they're saying, hey, we didn't do any of these promises. Let me grab all this country back and be closer to your borders. You understand the problem? So when we try to understand what is happening now, we got to understand how it came to be. And these are a very key components that the Western media don't talk about. I don't see that on CNN. I don't see that on Fox. I don't see that on my Canadian channels. And I don't mind. I love looking at Mrs. Palki Sharma here and her accents. But this is where I have to get my source to have at least an unbiased view of the world and being informed along the way. But I wanted to key and bring your attention to this because it is important.
Indicate otherwise. Nevertheless, Moscow bought the offer. It demolished the Warsaw Pact in the hope that the West would follow suit, that NATO too would be dissolved. But that never happened. NATO refused to cease operations. And to add insult to injury, they kept the door for membership open. Russia saw it as a stab in the back, and NATO kept pushing the dagger deeper. Look at this map. NATO started out with 12 founding members, but since the Soviet Union fell, it has radically expanded eastwards. In 1999, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic joined NATO. In 2004, there was another wave of expansion. 7 Central and Eastern European nations were made NATO members. Some of them were former Soviet republics. In 2009, Albania and Croatia joined NATO. And the most recent entries were Montenegro and North Macedonia, both situated in Russia's backyard. It does not end there. As of 2021, NATO officially recognized 3 more aspiring members: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, and Ukraine.
Now, this is where the problem is. This is where the problem is. Georgia is very close to the border, so they're not going to let this happen. But Ukraine is one of the biggest out of all these countries NATO got. Ukraine is one of the biggest one, not just in land that Europe desperately need, also in energy, right? Also in culture. It's in so many ways Ukraine is, they feel that it's, although it's called Ukraine and not Russia, they still feel like it's part of Russia. And remember, it's the power of the fittest. Only the strong will survive. These guys are bigger. They have more energy. They have more influence around the world. So they want to control whatever resource Ukraine have, or at least have the option to control it if they want to. Hey, is that a fair? Who knows? But it's going to always be, when it comes to power around this scale, this is that probably the biggest play for the power game, and it's basically the law of the strongest. That's what goes through, right? And right now, Ukraine and Russia, especially after Ukraine got rid of all their guns after USSR broke away, well, they left with no nukes. They left with nothing, at the mercy of NATO and at the mercy of Russia. But will Russia let that happen? No, right? So this is where the conflict started. Is by NATO encouraging these countries to be part of their group. And remember, now imagine, and this line right here, guys, is a direct line with the border of Russia. That means now, if Russia would ever have a tank that crossed this land right here, it means all the 30 countries of NATO can send bombs and send sanctions and do all kinds of things to Russia, right? And remember, from the beginning, they said we're not going to accept that. Let me see what's going on here. All right, let's play this.
Aspiring members: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, and Ukraine. Last we checked, NATO was also in talks with Sweden, Finland, and Serbia for membership. So to put it simply, much of Eastern Europe, which once used to be part of the Soviet Union, has now joined NATO. And this happened despite Russia's protests and warnings. The last reasonably friendly warning from Moscow came in the year 2007. Vladimir Putin addressed the annual Munich conference, where he said, and I'm quoting, "NATO has put its frontline forces on our borders. This expansion represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust. And we have the right to ask, against whom is this expansion intended? And what happened to the assurances our Western partners made after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact?"
Guys, that was in 2007, right? 2007. And that's a good question. Against whom this expansion is intended? And remember, when NATO started, who it was started for? It was started to be controlling the USSR aggression, right? And after this dissolution of USSR, Russia is weakened military-wise. They're not necessarily being too aggressive, but they're being provoked by this expansion. So it's an interesting point. And maybe throughout all these years that we've been hearing about Russia, could it be because of this expansion alone? As we're seeing, there have been multiple waves of expansion from NATO. Let's say there was no expansion around 1991. Would we ever hear anything about Russia in the news? That's one of the questions we need to ask ourselves here, because we don't know. No media is going to keep us updated on that. But these are interesting questions, and they need to be answered in some ways. because now we're all being dragged in this war, whether we want it or not, because we all have to pay high prices for gas, right? But that was, as she said, with her beautiful accent, it's that was the last friendly warning, and that was in 2007. And even back then, 2008, just a year after this, NATO was encouraging Ukraine to be joining forces with them. All right.
These sentiments have been echoed by a host of American strategists. I'll give you a few examples. June 1997, 50 prominent foreign policy experts signed an open letter to President Bill Clinton calling America's efforts to expand NATO a policy error of historic proportions. Then we have George Kennan, the father of America's containment policy during the Cold War. He too called NATO expansion a tragic mistake with no reason whatsoever. The warnings went on for decades. In 2008, William J. Burns, the US ambassador to Moscow, wrote a letter to the State Department where he said that Ukrainian entry into NATO is the brightest of all red lines for the Russian elite. He said that even Putin's sharpest critics at home consider Ukraine's entry a direct challenge to Russian interests. It does not end there. This is Robert M. Gates. He was the defense secretary in the Bush and Obama administrations. He wrote in his memoir that trying to bring Georgia and Ukraine into NATO was truly overreaching. Then we have Strobe Talbot.
But man, why do we have to go to India, man, to get this news? Jesus Christ. See, like, again, like I said, guys, if I had to, if there was a scale, and let's say the left side would be the West countries, and then the right side would be the Eastern countries. They are located in the East, and they're actually leaning more towards the Western views, right? But even them, they can analyze the situation and be critical and present it in a way that we can at least see both sides. This is just beautiful journalism. And that's why I have a thing for Shalma Palki, just the way she presented, man. Yeah. If I keep listening to her, I think I'll fall in love. So I got to stop. But let's play it. Let's play it.
The former Deputy Secretary of State, he described the Russian perception in a similar way, how they consider NATO as a vestige of the Cold War, and point out that if the Warsaw Pact was disbanded, why did the West not dismantle NATO? So several...
Interesting question, eh? Interesting question. Why did, if remember what NATO was founded for? To control the USSR aggression. There is no USSR. So why did NATO was not dismantled? And let me tell you why. It was not dismantled because now it is being used as a modern, not warfare, but as a tool for modern invasion. Right? It's the same conquering, because that's how empire grows. When you are an empire, you have the money, you have the wealth, you have the army. Well, the next step is to put that army to use and go and acquire more wealth so that you can expand as an empire, right? Of the great empires of the days. But that's barbaric in a way, right? There's a lot of people that get killed with that. So what's a more modern way of doing it? What's a 21st way of doing it? Well, let's do NATO. Let's join parties. Let's have fun together, right? I'll make sure I'll put my guy in here in power. And then if I tell him to, hey, I need you to do this for me, why not? It's just at the end of the day, it comes down to the same conclusion. Your will, your intent becomes actions. And if you're ruling an empire after you conquering it violently, or whether you made a deal with a puppet leading your country for you, it's still your will becomes your actions, right? And your will, your actions becomes at someone else's expense. And if that person has nukes, that may not be a good idea.
Several voices in the Western world had warned that Russia's protests have merit and that NATO expansion could spell serious trouble. Yet, successive American administrations paid no heed to these warnings. They kept widening NATO's security umbrella. Now, here's the thing. Trying to safeguard the sovereignty of a country is laudable indeed, but inviting a state right on Russia's border into an anti-Russian alliance is provocation. Ukraine is a sovereign country and has every right to want to join the NATO. But what's in it for the NATO? Why did they push for it? Their moves completely disregard the historical baggage between NATO and Russia. Many Russians were traumatized by the disintegration of the Soviet Union. In an instant, they lost one third of their territory, half of their population, and most of their military might. They found themselves much weaker before Western unity. They felt that an unjust settlement had been imposed on them, and it was done in their moment of maximum weakness and vulnerability. So they
Mm. That's you gotta understand where they're coming from too, eh? I mean, these are the I guess the nationalism from Russian nationalists that would think that way. Who knows? But I don't know if that's the major population. I don't know if it's half. I don't know if it's one third. That's another thing, right? You don't know how many people think that way. But one thing is clear: their leader thinks that way, and their leader makes decision, right? And their leaders is the one who has button on the nukes. So, right?
looked at any state leaving Russia's sphere of influence as both a strategic loss and a matter of national humiliation. When we analyze why Ukraine was attacked, all of this needs to be taken into account. Does this justify the war? Absolutely not. Russia's actions are criminal, no two ways about it. But the West is not innocent either.
Ooh.
They did not do what they could have.
Oh Lord. Ooh. This is a letter of love. God damn. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Palki Sharma. God, the West is not innocent. My God. Why do I have to go all the way to India to listen to words like this? Right? This is so beautiful, guys. This is music to my ears. Now, you see, we have a case, right? Yeah, she really, it's kind of like an essay, right? Did NATO push Ukraine into war? She brought the facts. She built her case, and then now she's stuck. She's giving you that punch, that okay, this is the conclusion. And you're right. And the conclusion is there is no two ways about it. Invading a country, especially in 21st century, it's a little bit antique, right? But this seems to be a signs of desperation from the Russians, and they still have guns, right? They still have that pride, and the West is not so innocent. And I just love the way she said it, guys. I just love the way she said it, and she just look at her face, guys. Look at her face, the way she said. That's why I respect this lady so much. It's
Absolutely not. Russia's actions are criminal, no two ways about it.
Wait, sorry.
But the West is not innocent
wait.
either.
We're gonna.
They did not do what they could have to avert this war.
Sorry, this thing is bugging up. But man, we gotta listen to it again, because we don't listen to this in the news. But I just love the face that she makes, and that's why I love her, man. The face that she makes, a straight face, no smile, serious, and yet she's still pretty, man. She's still pretty, but she's giving you facts. Like, if she was a man, she would have a balls of medals, right? Balls of medals, but she's not a man. But man, this is serious, guys. We don't have the media doing that anymore. We don't have the pure real journalists. That's what they're supposed to do, and that's what they have done early in this. I mean, in the early 1900s. You would go to radio, guys. You would not know which side the journalists were for, and they would give it to you the facts, right? And now based on the fact that she blamed both parties, and that's what I wanted. It's not no two way about it. Invading a country in the 21st century is criminal, especially a sovereign country. Great. But the West is not innocent either, and them pushing that aggression, right? They're encouraging more countries sharing the borders after they made a deal not to do so. That's not so innocent, and no one says, especially in the Western countries, in CNN, whether it's Canada, no one says that in the news. No one says that in the news. They all will blame Putin as second coming of Mr. Funny Mustache, but no one ever mentioned that. And it's just anyway. But let's listen to that again one last time.
needs to be taken into account.
Mm-hmm.
Does this justify the war?
No.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Russia's actions are criminal, no two ways about it.
Yes.
But the West is not innocent either. They did not do what they could have to avert this war.
Exactly. Oh, man. Beautiful. Beautiful. Look at that. But that's it, guys. That's what I wanted to share with you. I have another video to share with you guys as well. And we're going to talk about this one because she was mentioning in this stream, the video we listened earlier about the expert from the United States, from the West, that we're talking about the brightest of red lights and how these scenarios will lead to, to war. Now the sanctions are so severe. The ruble is falling. People are on both sides are losing life. And the way that I see it, guys, Russia has no other choice than go all in with this. There's no other choice because they have nothing to lose at this point, right? Even McDonald's is leaving their country. They cannot even get American burgers anymore. So Visa, right? They cannot even get Visa to be there anymore. So they have to find an alternative with that. So that will push them to China, who has been working on these technologies and to be away from what the US can do, right? Let me go very quickly on the chat. Interesting. Thank you. The woman who doesn't exist to you. How are you doing? How are you doing? Nice to see you here. And let's see. What's up? What's up? Okima. In the 60s, the US refused to allow Russia/USSR to station nukes in Cuba because it was too close to their borders. We're going to be talking about that. Thank you for this comment, sir. We're going to be talking about that right now, actually. So it follows that Russia will not all immediate neighbor to join it. Would not want, I guess, immediate neighbors to join NATO. Absolutely, facts, right? Talking about Mrs. Shala. What's her name again? It's very hard for me to pronounce, but don't worry, I'll pronounce her name right. Palki Sharma. Palki Sharma, right? Yeah. Heike, she's right. Absolutely. She is right. I understand what you and your journalist crush is saying, JC, but how will the invasion stop Ukraine from joining NATO? Well, let's save that for Mr. John Mearsheimer. We'll get into that. All right, that's the next part we're going to talk about. The mainstream journalism have no personality, straight bias. Absolutely. Let's get into that question. Very great question. I'm just a black guy on the internet. I'm just a random guy. How could I know, right? So let's listen to what experts have to say about this scenario right here, right? This video, guys, is from 2015. 25th September 2015. It was posted with 18 million views right here on YouTube. All right. Now, let's listen to a couple segments that I've saved for you guys. And we're going to be tackling deeper this situation happening right now. And remember what the purpose of this stream is. Did we already start World War III? Right. Now, let's listen to what this Mr. John Mearsheimer has to say about this. Oh, sorry. Let's make sure I got my son. And let's rewind that a little bit.
Pan-European mistake, which will have most serious consequences for pan-European security. Putin himself said, Georgia and Ukraine becoming part of NATO is a direct threat to Russia. You all remember that there was a war between Russia and Georgia in August 2008. That war was a consequence of this, because the Georgians thought we were sending them a signal that they could get uppity with the Russians and we would back them because they were going to become part of NATO. That's not what happened.
All right. Going back to your question again, we're going. I think this is on this entire clip right here that I'm going to play. All the clips that I'm going to play will be addressing this question that you have, Karen. But great question, great question. So right then and there, right? If we were just looking at history, what happened to Georgia? Decimated. Who did that? Ukraine. Sorry, not Ukraine. Russia. Right. So when you ask me what will happen to Ukraine, how would that stop the invasion? They may not be a country. They may not be a Ukraine country anymore. And right now, the U.S., the Russia, and Putin seems dead set on that. And we can look at it from Crimea. And once he set his mind on it, he won't stop until he gets it. And at this point, remember, he has nothing to lose. U.S. has already been very severe with the sanctions, and if that the longer that lasts, the worse it will be for them. So he's like, well, may as well as getting ready to launch some nukes. We got nothing to lose at this point. It's whether we last too long or too short will be destroyed as a country anyway. So we're willing to put everything on the table, even nukes. Right? That's where we're heading. So how is that going to stop? They're dead set on risking everything they want not to let this happen. And that's where when people are very strong-minded like that, and the other party are also strong-minded, there is no possibility to reach a middle point. War. And when the settlement cannot happen, that leads to war.
And you know what happened of NATO. That's not what happened. And you know what happened. The Russians clobbered the Georgians, and Georgia is in deep trouble today because it thought it could become part of NATO.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to remember that April 2008 summit, very important. That declaration, very important. And then what happens is you have a war. So those are the deep.
So again, that's what I'm saying, right? What will happen? At least Georgia was smaller. Georgia was smaller, so it was easier for the Russians to do that. But they made it clear from the beginning, and just like Mr. Okima mentioned, don't come in my neighborhood, right? Don't come in my neighborhood. That was part of the deal from the beginning. And regardless if the deal was made or not, that's not even a point. If the deal wasn't made, and then you come very close to a large superpower, I mean, it's not USSR superpower, but it still has the reminiscent of that. It's still controlling 40% of the European energy, right? They can control European natural gas supply, right? You don't want to mess with that. Let me find the next clip for you guys. We're gonna go through them very quick, but you're going to see we're gonna have fun today. But here, check this one here. And again, these videos are on YouTube since 2015.
What motivates this is that Russia is a great power, and it has absolutely no interest in allowing the United States and its allies to take a big piece of real estate of great strategic importance on its western border and incorporate it into the West. This should be hardly surprising to the United States of America. As all of you know, we have a Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine basically says that the Western Hemisphere is our backyard, and nobody from a distant region is allowed to move military forces into the Western Hemisphere. I can tell from looking at the audience that most of you are old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis like I am. You remember how we went stark raving crazy at the idea of the Soviets putting military forces in Cuba? This is unacceptable. Nobody puts military forces in the Western Hemisphere. That's what the Monroe Doctrine is all about. Can you imagine 20 years from now a powerful China forming a military alliance with Canada and Mexico and moving Chinese military forces onto Canadian and Mexican soil, and us just stand?
Yeah, guys. Isn't it that a fair question? Isn't it that a fair question? Can we imagine this to happen? Where, hey, we've already saw it, just like Mr. Okima mentioned, with the Cuban crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis, right? It was communism supporting each other. Russia, USSR was a communist country. and Cuba was a communist country, arguably still is, but that's it was supporting his pal, right? It was communism versus democracy, but he wasn't able to do that. It was not, they were not allowed to do that. If they had crossed the line, that would have started a nuke a nuke war with Russia or USSR, right? And based on this, they were not allowed to cross this. So now they're doing the same thing to the same power that was not allowed to do so in the 60s. Now they according to them, they are allowed to get closer to Russia now because Russia is not USSR.
Surprising to the United States of America. As all of you know, we have a Monroe Doctrine.
Yep.
The Monroe Doctrine basically says that the Western Hemisphere is our backyard, and nobody from a distant region is allowed to move military forces into the Western Hemisphere. I can tell from looking at the audience that most of you are old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis like I am. You remember how we went stark raving crazy at the idea of the Soviets putting military forces in Cuba? This is unacceptable. Nobody puts military forces in the Western Hemisphere. That's what the Monroe Doctrine is all about. Can you imagine 20 years from now, a powerful China forming a military alliance with Canada and Mexico and moving Chinese military forces onto Canadian and Mexican soil, and us just standing there and saying, this is no problem. We're all 21st century people, and worrying about Chinese forces there is what 19th century people like Vladimir Putin worry about. Of course, that's not going to happen. We're going to maintain the Monroe Doctrine with regard to China, just as we did with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So nobody should be surprised that the Russians were apoplectic about the idea of us putting Ukraine on the western side of the ledger. And by the way, they told us. I gave you the...
Yeah, that's it, guys. Nobody should be surprised about that. I agree. But and a lot of people don't know. They're not educated. They're just seeing that the reaction of um, Russia aggressing, being very aggressive with Ukraine. And again, we're condemning that. When you don't invade a sovereign country, but we know how nature works. Survival of the fittest. Whoever has the power will eventually use it to its benefit. But is that why the US is still feeling comfortable and doing what they were doing, even though they had multiple warning for years about this is not going to end well? Now Russia is to a point where they are putting their nukes team on high alert. They are willing to risk anything. They're attacking nuclear plants that could have the entire continent in, in darkness. They don't care anymore. They're just willing to go all the way to the extreme. All the way to the extremes because they have been patient enough and they have been friendly enough for years. But they were not heard. So we gotta, if we're being impartial, if we're being unbiased here, if we're going to have one rule for the if US is going to have one rule for Russia, then they cannot just break that rule, right? We have to they cannot be an hypocrite. And right now this is exactly what's happening. But they're doing it on the disguise of acquiring more land, acquiring more controls over the world, and also controlling their sworn enemy, which is technically not real true because Russia is too weak to be United States enemy. They have to worry about bigger forces like China. But when they're pushing that way, they're forcing Russia to go to China, and that's going to create the early alliance of a World War III. And last time we had a World War, guys, it was what, almost 15 years? 15 years or maybe 10? So it's, do we want another 10 years of war and playing with nukes? Is that good for the market? That's going to create a lot of uncertainty. Remember how the market reacted the first week of this Ukrainian war? It did not acted well. Look at how the market in Russia acted They didn't even open. They didn't even bother to open for trade for at least 3 days. So it's never a good thing. It's never a good thing. And as investors, we need to understand that, because if your plan is to invest for retirement and you wanted to exit the market relatively soon, you may be in for a surprise. But if you could anticipate that, and you can anticipate how long this conflict will last, then you'll be like, okay, let me start making plans and arrange my investments in a way that allows me to benefit from this and still allow me to exit it in the market in a way that I can control it, right? So that's why it's very good to understand the forces that I call them, the uncontrollable forces that can affect your wealth. Let me see. What's up, Snuggles? How are you doing? How are you doing, Snuggles? All right, so I have another clip for you very quickly. Let's get into it. Another clip.
And this brings us to the question of whether we can succeed or not. My argument is you're playing a losing hand. Right? And the reason you're playing a losing hand is because this is a competition between economic considerations and security considerations. The basic mindset of people in the West is that you can punish the Russians economically and they'll throw their hands up. My argument is when security considerations are at stake, when core strategic interests are at stake, and there's no question, ladies and gentlemen, in Russia's case, this is a core strategic interest, countries will suffer enormously before they throw their hands up. Right? So
Very quick, very key point, right? Because they have nothing to lose and they have a lot to gain if they conquer Ukraine, right? Ukraine offers a lot of commodities to the world, and they it didn't really bother them that they were independent, right? As long as NATO doesn't have to their influence into them. But now that NATO wants to get it, then they're like, well, no, we'll try to get it first. It's right next to our borders. We'll get it first. And that's why it means, but it's a it's there is a lot of it's a strategic force for Russia to go there, but it's not necessarily a strategic force for United States to fight for it because it's just too far from it, right? The best thing they can hope to get out of this is to make sure they can get their own puppets into power. And eventually, if they want to control the army, then they can influence that puppet to do so. But um, they're not going to have that much to gain. Like, it's not worth risking a nuclear bomb. That's basically it's not worth that much, right?
countries will suffer enormously before they throw their hands up. Right?
Sorry,
Mistake. When this is a competition between economic considerations and security considerations, the basic mindset of people in the West is that you can punish the Russians economically and they'll throw their hands up.
And we've seen that. We've seen all the sanctions that happened to the point where it destroyed the ruble, and they're still going full steam towards Ukraine. So they're not going to do that. That's basically what he put. And that was in 2015, guys. 2015, not now.
My argument is when security considerations are at stake, when core strategic interests are at stake.
Core strategic interests. Core strategic interest is what Ukraine has, what can offer the world, right? Large exporter of wheat. Just think of wheat alone and how many applications we have for wheat. Sunflower oil, right? Leaders in that. Lands, they can supply food for over 600 million people. This is twice the population of the United States. Europe is suffering in terms of space. They have no space. Ukraine has tons of space for agriculture. That alone, Russia would want to control that. Just that alone, let alone that when you add that with the energy Ukraine can provide, right? Strategic place. That's what he means by a core strategic place for a country, for an empire, for a superpower. And Ukraine has that, and it's right next to a border. They don't need to invade it if there is nothing in between, but they would rather get it first before the NATO countries or before the US.
Russians economically, and they'll throw their hands up. My argument is when security considerations are at stake, when core strategic interests are at stake, and there's no question, ladies and gentlemen, in Russia's case, this is a core strategic interest, countries will suffer enormously before they throw their hands up. Right? So you can inflict a lot of pain on the Russians, and they're not going to quit. And they're not going to quit because Ukraine matters to them. And by the way, Ukraine doesn't matter to us. You understand there's nobody calling for us to fight in Ukraine. Even John McCain, who up until recently has never seen a war he didn't want to fight, right, is not calling for using military force in Ukraine. What John McCain is saying is that Ukraine is not a vital strategic interest for the West. That's what he's saying. It is a vital strategic interest for the Russians. They've made that perfectly clear, and not just Putin, right? So in terms of the balance of resolve, it's all on their side. And I showed you that slide up there that depicted how much economic leverage the Russians have because of all that natural gas going westward. So we're playing a losing hand here.
But exactly, guys. I actually made a video about that on one of my video shorts, talking about how the Russians started making threats. They started making threats. They're like, hey, we're starting to feel those sanctions, but we let it play because you guys were still buying our oil, and now President Biden this week is like, you know what, we're gonna ban Russians oil. We're not going to buy that anymore because we've been funding his war the last 3 weeks by buying oil. I think it was about something like $700 million per day Russians making just from selling oil to the world. And even with that, the price was rising already. But when you start buying Russian oil, you're going to have to supplement that somewhere else. And this is where our next video is going to be very interesting, because things like this leads to war, right? The lack of access to commodities, to basic needs, pushes empires, pushes countries to go use military force to get it. And that's why I'm saying, are we already in a World War III, guys? Are we already in a World War III? What's happening with Russia and Ukraine right now is just the beginning. Last time, remember when we did the part 1, we talked about how the World War II only started with a small conflict between two countries. Next thing you know, it encapsulated almost the entire world. So it's the same thing happening all over again, right? So very interesting points. I wanted to share that point with you guys. But there is something else we're going to consider. Let's say that he's wrong, right? Let's say that everything he said is wrong, that Russia, the sanctions might fail, or the sanction might raise their hand. Let's say that, or let's see what he has to say about the other side of the story.
Let's assume that I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume that we're playing a winning hand and that we are capable of backing Putin into a corner. And we're getting close to pushing him off a cliff. Is this good? You're talking about a country that's got thousands of nuclear weapons. And the only circumstance, really, under which states use nuclear weapons is when they're desperate, when they think their survival is at stake.
The only case where countries start considering using nukes is when they're desperate. The only case where countries start considering using nukes is when they're desperate, when they think their survival is at stake. What happens if you start creating sanctions that destroys their economy of the people in there? So even now, the people that were against Putin, that was rallying against the outside, right, trying to get Putin out of the Kremlin, now they're like, wait a second, these sanctions are tough. These sanctions are tough. They're affecting us. They can help, like, Putin get the population in his behalf, in a way. Be like, hey, support me, help me fight those sanctions. The population might say, hey, maybe the section wouldn't happen if you were there. But now, when you have McDonald's leaving the country, right? The way the McDonald's did it, they're not coming back. Now Putin might say, hey, but we lost McDonald's. We're not going to have any fast food anymore for our survival. But the all joke aside, guys, the worst part is the ruble. Imagine all the Russian people saving their retirement on in saving their money in the bank. Within 1 week, your entire portfolio is just worth like 90% less than what it was supposed to be. And this is your money for retirement. You've been working 10, 20 years for this. And now we multiply that by millions of people. That's when he's saying when countries are desperate, what do they do? What do they do when they're desperate? Thinking about their survival. The survival of the Russian people and the survival of the Ukrainian people are both at stakes. First, Russia attacks Ukraine, causing arms to the Ukrainian people, refugees all over the world because of that. But now, because of that, also Russian and the sanctions that if that was a deal between them, maybe that deal would be settled very quick, and war stops, fight stops, people are safe. But it's lasting longer and longer. Sanctions are happening, limiting what Russia can do. Again, as he said, there is no strategic benefit for us to do so other than just say that, hey, this is what it is. We're the leader of the world. We say we control the narrative here, and we don't like this. It's kind of like a power play in a way, right? Based on what I see now, it's kind of like the US is trying to control the narrative just for power play, not necessarily to get something out of it. Whereas Russia can get something physical out of it. They can control not just the energy now. If they control Ukraine, they control the lands, the agriculture lands that the world will need. And if you start talking about nukes, right, you're going to need if you start talking about nukes, right? If you start talking about war in times of uncertainty and inflation rising, you're going to need the supply of food, not less supply of food, because that's going to make things even worse. Okay? So when countries consider nukes is when they're feeling desperate. And Russia has been feeling desperate about reaching the Western ears for many years. They've been telling them not to come close. Many years not to come close. They play ball. They remove their treaty about Warsaw Pact. They allow a bunch of countries to be independent. They stay in corners, but NATO is coming closer and closer in their doorstep, and they feel threatened with that. Now with the sanctions, it's kind of like pushing them to go all in. Okay, and you can actually see the desperation in the war right now based on how Russia is attacking. Russia thought it was going to be a very quick and easy tactic, right? Within a week, we invade Ukraine, boom. They're finding that it's way harder than anticipated. And they're having serious logistics issues, where to the point where the soldiers are breaking up into grocery stores and then getting food because they cannot get the food from their supply, the war machine that they had at the border, right? Tanks are being abandoned because tanks are running on gas. They consume a lot of gas, but the people are resilient, and they've been throwing cocktail Molotovs on the truck that brings the gas to the tanks. All right. So because they're a lot smaller, what they've been actually doing is guerrilla tactics and attacking the logistics. It's a very strategic style of war, which we know very well as us Asians, because we invented guerrilla warfare. Right? You attack the logistics when you're fighting a bigger army than you. And Ukraine's been applying that. So now The Russian is like, well, hey, since we're suffering from logistics, they're throwing the big guns, the long range missile, more air domination. They're throwing the big forces out there. They're being more aggressive, and they don't care as much anymore for the people. It's because they're trying to get to the goal faster. And who suffer from that? Ukrainian people, right? And the more they're being aggressive, the more the Russian people will be suffering too from the sanctions, which will lead to what? Which will lead to more desperation. And what will Putin with armed with full of nukes will do when
Talking
being
about a country
depressed?
that's got thousands of nuclear weapons. And the only circumstance, really, under which states use nuclear weapons is when they're desperate, when they think their survival is at stake. So what you're talking about is putting Putin in a situation where he's desperate. And if you go home and Google Putin and nuclear brinksmanship, you'll be reading all the articles that come up for the next 2 years, right? Because he's making it clear that you're fooling around with his core strategic interests. And again, he's got thousands of nuclear weapons. So you're putting yourself in a position, right? You're putting yourself in a position where you're willing to risk a possible nuclear war over a piece of real estate, Ukraine, that is not of vital strategic interest to the United States. Again, it's not of vital strategic interest to us. By the way, and this will be my final point on this, what's truly amazing about all of this is that we were talking about incorporating Ukraine into NATO when we have now acknowledged by not taking military action over Ukraine that it's not a vital strategic interest. You understand that when you incorporate Ukraine into NATO, you're giving them an Article 5 guarantee, which says you'll come to their defense if they're attacked. You only give Article 5 guarantees to countries that are of vital strategic interest, like
And that's
Germany during the Cold War. What will we do?
And that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a serious advantage that if you the Article 5 from the NATO, right? If you join the NATO and then you become part of the NATO, you covered by this Article 5, which means um, you know, every country part of NATO is going to come and protect you, right? But why would you give that to someone? Only if there is something that they have that you want, that you depend on, right? It could be a good play for foreign policies to use that card whenever you need to. And you're not going to give it to everyone. You're especially not going to give them to any country that can be swayed or be invaded or have the mole in there from your enemies, right? You're going to use it only for so that he said, just like he says, for core strategic interest. Like, for example, if you desperately need oil from Saudi Arabia, for example, because you're not self-sufficient, which the U.S. was at some point, but they no longer are, then maybe that's a tool you might want to propose them, because now it protects them from Iran. That's almost their version of Russian that wants to come at their necks and get their oil, right? And remember, this is the country that made the deal with you that tells you, hey, I will agree to use the US dollar as a mean to exchange oil, which is the only reason why the US dollar is still relevant today. Because what we have printed to oblivion, we're not producing as much anymore. China is exporting everything to the world. We're not exporting Canada or the US is not exporting as much as it could. Right, so it's you are on a decline as an empire, and the only thing supporting you is the U.S. dollar / the partnership you have with Saudi Arabia to say, hey, you have to sell U.S. dollar to the entire world. You have to sell your oil to the entire world using U.S. dollar, and they control the market for the most part. But so a play like that, if you're going to use the Article 5 as a card to control how it works, that's definitely a country you might want to consider, because they need your protection and you need their oil, right? And not only you need their oil, but you also need them to sell the oil to other countries by making sure they're using the US dollar, which this is how you have the power and the status of the world reserve currency. That's the only thing maintaining the lifestyle of Americans, the dream. Or it's the only thing maintaining it. But you remove that, is a problem. And if you leave it to the point where it's easy, where it can be influenced by other countries, where China could come into the play and get and offer Saudi Arabia something that they want, as opposed to they can get it from the US. This is a problem. So when it comes to foreign policies for the US, um, you got to put all your attention into only the strategic cores and not necessarily focus on expansion, because it's not really going to be used as much, right? And talking about Saudi Arabia, how are things now? Because remember, we're talking about as an investors, right? We don't want the stock market to crash all the way to zero. When you sell your stocks, you're going to ask for US dollars in exchange, right? So US dollars is still there and it's still useful to a point. But what if we lose the world's currency status? Let me see. What's up, Mr. Snuggles? What does NATO want to be so close to Russia? Does anybody know the reason? As we went over it earlier, NATO was founded to be against USSR. NATO was founded to be against Russia. It was a way to control USSR aggression. Therefore, a way to control Russian aggression. The problem is Russian agreed not to be aggressive. They actually dismantle the pact that they made to counter NATO, and then allow a bunch of countries to be independent, stop aggressing. But what happened after NATO started expanding, and now they're expanding to be very close to where they are in Ukraine. The reason why Russia didn't do anything is because Russian was pretty weak after the USSR being dismantled, and also the countries that NATO was invading or acquiring was further from its border. So they're like, you know what? We see what you're doing as aggression. We don't like it. We're telling you don't do it. Don't expand any further. But it's still far from us. So, we're weak. We're not going to start a war right now. Fine. But over time, you're getting closer and closer and closer, and we're also getting stronger and stronger and stronger. We're like, hey, don't move any further. Don't move any further. And you're still moving. And now you want this country right here without border? Hell no. That's how the conversation goes, basically. And that's basically why but NATO wants to expand because they it's another way of as I said, it's another way of conquering a new country, the modern way of doing so. But it's still giving more power to it gives more power to US the larger they expand, and less power to Russia, and Russia doesn't want that. Especially these countries were former Soviet countries, right? But let's see the current state of affairs. Sorry, very quickly, let me go over Mr. Okima's question. Being closer to Russia would give NATO a military advantage in case of a war breaks out. Absolutely. Between Russians and NATO. Absolutely. It will give that advantage, and it would force the hands of Russian people. And not only that, it would also control a lot of lands. Like you would seduce Ukraine to sell only to the West, for example, instead of Russia. You can do that. Let's see where the current state of affairs are with Saudi Arabia. So I have this video here from our lady here, Mrs. Parky Sharma. All right, let's see what she has to say about the current state of affairs. This is a video that was released today. Saudi Arabia, UAE ignore phone calls for Biden. This is not good. Remember, the only thing holding the U.S. Right now, especially the U.S. dollar, is the fact that Saudi Arabia is selling their oil and accepting US dollar in return. If that deal is done, We were talking about the rise and falls of empires. Well, that was definitely guaranteed. We already in a fall. We're already looking at the fall of the U.S. empires, but that just accelerates it. All right. So let's see what we have. Let's hear what she has to say.
Joe Biden, how he led Ukraine down the war path, how his failed diplomacy gave Russia the advantage. Do you remember what Biden said after taking office? America is back, he said. Diplomacy is back. Back to where exactly? Let me show you. Joe Biden's immediate priority is to stabilize oil prices, to make West Asian countries pump more oil.
Man, I just like it, man. I already feel like there is something coming. It's just the serious demeanor. I'm telling you, man. She's about to. I think she's like a barbecue chief. You know what I'm saying? She just grills everyone. And now it's Biden turns to get grilled.
Just one problem. He cannot get through to them. And I mean literally. According to U.S. media reports, the leaders of Saudi Arabia get through to the Asian countries.
Let me say,
Joe Biden's immediate priority is to stabilize oil prices, to make West Asian countries pump more oil.
Pump it.
Just one problem. He cannot get through to them. And I mean literally. According to U.S. media reports, the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not answering Biden's calls.
No way.
When did that happen?
Oh.
We don't have a specific date, but reports say in the last few weeks, the White House tried to arrange two calls, one with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the second with the UAE Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Both men, the Saudi and the Emirati, refused to take the call.
Guys, this is not good. This is not good. Sheesh. Remember, guys, the only thing holding the U.S. supremacy here is the world reserve currency. And also the fact that Saudi Arabia is selling their oil and accepting US dollars. US dollars, right? Now they're not responding to Biden's call. Why? What happened? What happened? Sheesh. Palki Sharma, please educate us. Right.
But do you know what's even more humiliating?
Yes.
Both of these leaders spoke to Vladimir Putin.
Oof. Sheesh. What, man? What's going on? What did Biden do? What did Biden do so that Saudi Arabia, the probably arguably the biggest partner holding the keys to U.S. empires, is not responding and talking to their enemy right now? Sheesh. Grilled him. What happened?
The Saudi and the Emirati refused to take the call.
Yeah.
But do you know what's even more humiliating? Both of these leaders spoke to Vladimir Putin. What does the snub reveal? A trust deficit. Both Saudi Arabia and the UAE are key U.S. defense partners. They depend on American weapons. They depend on American leadership. And Biden has failed to give both.
Man, guys, I'm enjoying these videos so much. Just look at the face as she's delivering that stagger right behind the back. Jesus Christ. She just have a way to grill you with grace. You know what I mean? She grilled you with grace. Whoo. Man, I wonder if President Biden listened to news like this. Man, how could he? Even Fox News is not going to go that deep on him. And Fox News hate Biden. They hate anything that has to do with liberals, right? But man, gee, that was a good one. And they provide facts, right? And let's listen to what she has to say, because I want to understand more about what did she means by Biden did not provide leadership.
They depend on American weapons. They depend on American leadership. And Biden has failed to give both. He cut off military support for the war in Yemen. He declassified documents linked to the Khashoggi murder. Maybe the intentions were good, but the fact is, actions have consequences. You cannot alienate leaders and then count on their support. If you do, they will not pick up your call.
These are rookie mistakes, right? Rookie mistakes. Yes, she's attractive. Indeed, she is. She grills them with grace. Absolutely, man. I love it. I've never seen that before in my life. Someone grilled you with grace. Sheesh. Get on her, man. Wait, sorry. Let me play Paul Key, man. I want to hear about what she has to say.
And then count on their support. If you do, they will not pick up your call. Joe Biden should know this.
Yeah.
He keeps bragging about his 50-year career, about his foreign policy chops.
Get
But
on
what
him.
has he achieved with all this experience? He could not even unite the West.
Ooh.
Each country was saying something different. Biden said Nord Stream 2 would be cancelled. Germany refused to comment. Biden said he was open to cutting Russia off from SWIFT. Europe was not. And now Biden says he's banning Russian oil and gas. Again, Europe is not.
And why is Europe not against that? Because that's the lifeline of European countries. Him is all the way on the other side of Atlantic. He's not going to suffer the blunt of that, just like the European countries will. And remember, technically, United States has the power to be self-sufficient if they really want to. If they knew if they had common sense, they would be self-sufficient, right? Canada would be self-sufficient, but European countries are on a different island when it comes to, I mean, not island, they're on a different case when it comes to energy. And they depend a lot on Russia. They depend a lot on the energy coming from there. And that's why Russia has a lot of leverage in controlling what happens. So that creates division in NATO. But hey, who's the leader? Who's supposed to be the leader of NATO? The US, technically Biden. So just like she said, she cannot even unite the West.
Biden said he was open to cutting Russia off from SWIFT. Europe was not. And now Biden says he's banning Russian oil and gas. Again, Europe is not. On Nord Stream and SWIFT, Europe did relent, but by then it was too late. Russia had already reached the gates of Kiev. Biden had enough time to prepare, to reach out to his allies, to work on joint sanctions. But Joe Biden, the president of the United States, was slow to react. His supporters say it's part of quiet diplomacy. Well, maybe it is, but Biden's diplomacy was so quiet, Russia could not even hear it.
Yo, jeez. Oh, grill them with grace. Sheesh. Shout out to Karen. Karen, she's saying that she will keep it all the way real. Absolutely, man. That's what I want from the media, man. That's what I want from the journalist. I just want it real. I don't care. And sometimes you can watch a video and you will be like, she's the biggest fan of Biden. And then you're watching this video right now, she's getting straight on her, man, on him, man. It's like, keep it real. Let's continue. Let's continue. Sorry.
And the president has a history of this. On most foreign policy issues, Joe Biden has been wrong. We made a list for you today.
Really?
In 1991, he opposed the war against Iraq. As it turned out, it was a resounding military and diplomatic success. In 2003, he supported the invasion of Iraq. We all know how that turned out. Mistake number 3 came in 2011. Joe Biden changed his position on Iraq. He pushed then-President Barack Obama to withdraw U.S. soldiers. And what happened next? Sectarian violence, more meddling from Iran, and finally the emergence of ISIS. Mistake number 4, Biden said the collapse of Afghanistan's civilian government was not, quote unquote, inevitable.
Never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up. And that was not from her. That was from someone who worked with him for a very long time, Mr. President Obama, or ex-President Obama, right? That's what he has to say about his vice president. That's what he had to say about his own vice president. And Ben, right now things are being effed up very quick, real fast, possibly leading to World War III. And Joe Biden's vice president is not also innocent in all this. Some could say she has her words was the one that was the word that triggered this war that we have right now with Russia and Ukraine. But hey, I won't even get into that.
The collapse of Afghanistan's civilian government was not, quote unquote, inevitable. As it turned out, it was inevitable. The Taliban conquered Afghanistan even before America's evacuation. Take any foreign policy decision, chances are Joe Biden chose the wrong side. I'll give you another example. This is from 1997, when Biden was a senator. He was responding to a simple question. If NATO expands eastward, would Russia move closer to China?
How long ago was that? Because this is a very relevant question on our modern day right now, because that's exactly what happens, right? But wait, this looks like a very young Biden, although he still had gray hair, but relatively young compared to how he looks now. Wait, I want to go back just to get to the year.
If NATO expands 97.
97.
When
Okay.
Biden was a senator, he was responding to a simple question. If NATO expands eastward, would Russia move closer to China? Listen to his reply.
They talked about they don't want this NATO expansion. They know it's not in their security interests and on, and said, well, and if you do that, we may have to look to China. And I couldn't help using the colloquial expression from my state by saying to Zaganos, lots of luck in your senior year. Good luck. And if that doesn't work, try Iran.
Oh, man. Now, what if we actually do that and then he tries Iran and gets Iran to play ball with him? Now what? What if he actually do that and China, he works with China, which technically it's looking like it's working? Man, this guy's tall. Or is it because this guy's short? I don't know. But what you don't want is you don't want this alliance, because alliance win wars. Alliance win wars. And U.S. has a lot of military power, but when you start talking about alliance with nukes countries, it's a different deal.
Condescending, ignorant, and most importantly, wrong. Russia is moving closer to China. Both countries have agreed on a strategic partnership. They're working to blunt Western sanctions. We just told you how Zelensky made grave miscalculations. Well, at least Zelensky is a political novice. What excuse does Biden have?
Guys, very quickly, Zelensky is a comedian that was turned president. This is a pattern the U.S. is doing. In my country, Haiti, they also very pushed for a comedian, someone who was swearing in his music, someone who was swearing in the media, putting his pen down, banned in Europe, banned in New York. The former president of Haiti was banned in New York because he was putting his pen down during a carnival, right? And this guy, has been the president of Haiti for was it one term or two term? At least one term, right? And it's the same thing that the U.S. is replicating other places, encouraging other people to get on power that they can control, and they have a thing for comedian. It's kind of like the bad jokes on the world, right? So Mr. Zelensky here is a comedian, but he definitely has more heart than my comedian in Haiti. I'll respect him for that, just for his guts to stick around and pretend that he's actually fighting. But at least he could have flee, right? He could have flee, and he did it. I'll give him that with that much respect. But I wanted to bring that to the discussion here. This is not random, right? That comedian being a president, it's not random, and that wouldn't normally that you would not see this happening in the United States, right? But I guess you could see that. But do you think Arnold Schwarzenegger could be president one day? I don't know if he's a comedian, but who knows? Let's see what she has to say. Let's finish with this video.
Well, at least Zelensky is a political novice. What excuse does Biden have? He failed to foresee two major political realities of today: Russia's opposition to NATO expansion and the rise of China. As president, those mistakes still haunt him. Just think about it. The whole world knows who the aggressor is. The whole world sympathizes with Ukraine, at least privately. Yet Joe Biden has failed to create a global coalition.
Yeah, she's
who the
at
aggressor
least
is. The
privately.
whole world.
The whole world sympathizes with Ukraine. Pause. At least privately. Sheesh. What do you mean? What do you mean, Paul Kishama? Are you saying that there's a lot of secret people supporting Putin? but they can't speak for some reason. But hey, man, she's speaking. She's speaking facts. Come on, man, keep grilling Biden, man. I want her to grill Biden with grace. All right, let's get into it.
Sympathizes with Ukraine, at least privately. Yet Joe Biden has failed to create a global coalition. The unity that he keeps harping on, he keeps talking about, is at best Western unity, and that too is cracking. What about his West Asian allies? What about the Indo-Pacific? They're still not on board. The truth is, Europe would have reacted furiously no matter what. After all, this war is in their backyard. The question is, what has America brought to the table?
Sheesh. These are some serious questions here, eh? What has America brought to the table? Would you hear comments like that in Fox News, CNN, CNBC? Like, sheesh. That's what I'm saying, guys. The importance of true journalism, the importance of good media. You need two sides to be able to be informed and start critical thinking and start thinking about things. And that, as an investor, gives you a better sense of the conflict, which in terms can help you time it. Right? If you're just listening to one side and you're listening to what Mr. Biden has to say, everything is all right. Right? Everything's all right. But Mrs. Palki Sharma here is cooking them. Cooking them with grace.
Until now, nothing. 1 year into his presidency, Joe Biden has single-handedly bungled Pax Americana.
Bungle. God damn. Ooh. I feel cooked for Biden.
WION is now.
All right. We're done. Man. I just love these videos, man. I mean, I gotta start watching someone else too. It's just like, attractive wise. I just love her smile. But let's get into it, guys. Let's get into it. Wait, so let me see what's going on here. How are you doing, Mr. Weird Signing Ish? How are you doing? Did I miss some comments here? You're doing good. JC, will you do a video on Haiti? Oh man, no, hell no. Look, I'm an investor, man. I'm looking for wealth engineering. I'm looking on how to engineer my wealth. And right now, man, Asian politics is not going to engineer my wealth. So I'm not gonna get into that. Maybe on my other channels. I have another channel called JC the Black Guy. If one day I'm really, if I'm really into it like that, sure, I'll talk about some things. But right now, nah, no point. Just care about my money, man. Gotta get my money high so that one day I could influence my country in a positive sense, right? To get them to start inspiring them so that they can build this country to be the first, not just the first Black nation who got their independence, but also the first Black nation to get a world reserve currency status, right? That's my new vision for Haiti. Thank you to Mr. Ray Dalio, who inspired me into thinking that way. But until I can actually influence things, I don't really want to pay attention right now to Haiti. Right now, my goal is to focus on building that influence, however it comes, whether it's YouTube, whether it's monetary, whether it's both. Who knows? We'll see. Where would he flee to? Putin, which is long, nowhere to run or hide. Yeah. If you're talking about I don't know where he would run. And that's the thing, though, is because now he's forcing him in a corner. He has nothing to lose. He'll go all in. Kima, Biden's report card. He needs to go back to school. At his late 70s. Who knows? But the question is now, right? And we're almost done, but we're going to wrap up with this last clip. And I think that's going to answer your question, because we were having this conversation the other day. What will India do? Because now if we're looking at the map, right, we have the East starting with the Russian, and then let's say China. Right now, they have all the advantage in the world to work together and to get there. But India is in between, and we don't really know where India stands, right? Does it stand with the West side? Does it stand with China? Does it stand with Russia? And if Russia is partnering with China, what would India do? I think we don't know if there is a war that's going to be playing a factor as well. I don't remember if India is one of the countries with nukes, but hey, in terms of people, they're there, and in terms of influence in the future, they might be up there too. So it's not necessarily a big empire, but in terms of a superpower, we can put India there, and they can definitely influence geopolitics in a way. So my question is: are we going to see an alliance with Russia, India, um, China, and then Iran? Right? Are we going to see an alliance with these four countries in a case of a war with the NATO countries? Right? That's going to be an interesting see, because I already put Canada, US in the same boat. I don't know what France will do. In the past, France and Russia has been almost on the same side in a way, but who knows, right? Who knows? Germany, we don't know. Germany could swing both ways, right? Let's assume France and Germany will go to NATO countries slash alliance with US. We have Italy. Italy is right now is not necessarily relevant. I don't know. England, yeah, England. So, the war is basically setting up itself already, guys. And a lot of these countries have nukes. So just like we were going over the last video, it's going to be a war of nukes if it gets there. The only way that we don't get there is for some sort of true understanding and from US to back away, focus on only on their own soil, which is not going to happen. And then we'll see how it goes, guys. But right now, when we understand the powers at play, it's interesting to see. How are you doing, Mr. Peter Investor M? A salute to you, salute to the chat, salute to you, sir. Thank you for being here. And let's go over that video right here, last video from Mrs. Palki Sharma, to educate us on where would India land if there is an alliance, right? And we don't know. We don't know. I don't think anyone tackled this question yet. But at least if we understand the past, the history of India, that could let us to understand where would that fit, and to understand also the influence on how that could impact the coming years or the coming months and this conflict that already is being felt globally, but right now is only between two countries. Okay, before we start, India will continue to export their spices, medical appliances, rice, and their technology expat to USA, who will in turn build their economy. India in joining forces with Russia in war. Okay, all right. Let's see what Mr. and Mrs. Palki Sharma has to say. I have to do my research on this organization. I don't know if they're located in India, but she's definitely Indian, and we'll see. I don't know where they're located, but their ties to India is strong, I would say. Let's see.
1971, when India and Pakistan went to war over the humanitarian crisis in East Pakistan, the forces arrayed against India were formidable. Aircraft from Jordan, Iran, Turkey, and France were bolstering the Pakistani military. The US and the UK were providing moral and naval support. They both dispatched warships to the Indian Ocean. It was a coordinated plan to intimidate India. British ships would target India's western coast. Americans would make a dash in the Bay of Bengal. To counter this multi-dimensional threat, New Delhi sent out an SOS call. It urged global powers for support. And there was only one country that listened: the Soviet Union. It dispatched a fleet of naval vessels from Vladivostok, a number of nuclear-armed ships and atomic submarines. They encircled American and British warships, stopped them from entering India's territorial waters, and prevented a direct clash between India and the US-UK combined.
Interesting, eh? And that was not that long ago, is it? 1971? USSR back then had lots of ships, right? They're at the might of their military power, fighting the British and the USA. Interesting, right? We're getting somewhere here. We don't know, right? We don't know what will happen in the World War III scenarios. Again, India is pretty silent on their intentions so far. Very wise people, very old. And whenever a country is old, has a lot of history, they tend to have um, becoming very wise, right? Very wise. Lots of respect for the East, because of the wisdom. But interesting, right? Interesting. And now, and for those who don't know, USSR basically is Russia now. What used to be USSR is basically now Russia. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Moscow was a reliable partner for New Delhi when no one else was, as Washington consistently ignored India's concerns and sided with Pakistan. Today, the story from 1971 may be a little more than a fond memory, but its geopolitical underpinnings still remain intact. Yes, there have been some minor hiccups and interruptions, but Moscow remains one of India's most dependable partners. And this week,
Interesting, eh? Russia and Moscow, I'm sorry, Russia and New Delhi, they have good partnership for the since those days. By the way, this video is recorded December 5th, 2021. So it's fairly, fairly updated, especially right before Russian Putin was gearing up for war, or actually was gearing up for war even back then.
this partnership will enter its next.
Wait, Karine. By the way, Peter Investor M, India, exactly. India and Pakistan has nukes. That's what I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if India had nukes, but hey, they have nukes. That means an alliance between Russia and by the way, how did India get nukes? How did India get nukes? In your opinion, how did India got nukes? Do you think it was Russian had to do something about that? Who is funding Russians are like India's army, providing them tools, military tools? If they had such a strong tie in 1971, interesting, right? So India and Pakistan has nukes. Now, if there is some kind of partnership between or alliance between Russia, China, India, and then Iran, sheesh. These are four countries with lots of nukes. All doesn't really except India, doesn't really play ball with United States. But even back then, 1971, we saw that the United States were being aggressive and USSR/Russia was coming to the rescue. USSR is no longer the current Russia does not have the power as the USSR in the past. Of course they don't. But that's what I'm saying. Alliances. One country, of course. But if we're talking about two countries and three countries, I don't know.
Phase. Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. On the 6th of December, India will receive a rather special guest, the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. The visit is important. Its symbolism cannot be downplayed. This is the second time President Putin is stepping out of Russia this year. The first was in June to meet US President Biden in Geneva. And since then, he has skipped visits to the G20, the climate summit in Glasgow, and rescheduled his tour of China. He will now come to India first. This indicates Russia's abiding interest in its relationship.
He rescheduled his plan to visit China to go visit India first. I don't know, guys. I don't know.
He will now come to India first. This indicates Russia's abiding interest in its relationship with India, a relationship that has withstood the test of time and geopolitical churns. It helps to begin with history. It's hard to put a date, but India and Russia have known each other for centuries. All the way back to the 4th century, Russia used to be a transit trade route between Europe and India. Indian merchants would frequently visit Moscow, Astrakhan, and St. Petersburg. Russian travelers would visit Indian cities, document the culture and people in their tales. In the 18th century, Russia's last reigning empress, Catherine the Great, published the first Russian translation of the Bhagavad Gita. In the 19th century, Russian Tsar Paul I planned to invade British India to weaken the British Empire. The Tsar was assassinated, the plan was cancelled. Now, for most of modern history,
What will India do if Russia and China partners in this war? What will India do? And this is another country with nukes. Hey, Mr. Peter Investor. Hey. I don't know, guys. I don't know. But from what I'm hearing so far, I it seems that there's a lot of history there, is it? Right? If you had to make a decision, who is more powerful? A, mass of people, B, money and mass benefits. I need the context for this. This sounds like a very insightful and deep question that I need to think about, but I need the context. Maybe that can help. More powerful in what? If you had to make as a country, you mean mass of people, country, and when we talk about power, what are we talking about here? Influence, getting your will to become law, right? In a democracy, maybe in a true democracy, people, but the East is not really a. I mean, I don't know about India, but the East is not really a big fan. The East is not really a big fan of democracy, is it? Especially those communist countries, Russia and China. I don't know. So, from a country like this, the mass of people may not play a factor, especially if they acquiesce to the government's law, which China has pretty much trained its citizens to do so. So, in that case, money and mass benefit would definitely be more powerful than mass of people. And some can argue that even on the US is not really a democracy, right? It's a republic. You elect, and also in Canada, it's not necessarily a democracy because whoever you elect is only a prime minister. So who's the president? The queen? I don't know. Who is the prime minister answering to? Not the people, right? So some might say that we don't really have anywhere in the world where the mass of people is truly powerful, except Haiti. Because in Haiti, man, if the people really are mad, they're gonna burn the country down. They're gonna burn the country down. You better please the people. So it's also because in Haiti we don't. The government has no army to really enforce their rules. So it's the wild wild west there. But let me go through the question real quick. India needs to keep their heads down and mind their business. With Russia, India will be strong defense wise, but with America and Canada, India will be weak financially. Yeah, I admit, I agree that India will be weak financially, but I don't know. Whenever we talk about alliances, that changed the game. Look what the USSR alliance did for almost a century, right? There was a time it was just one country, and then it became an alliance, USSR. So during a war, remember there was the Triple Entente. We were looking at, and then there was also the other alliance, World War One, and then there was like World War Two. We had an alliance. We're looking like right now we're looking into an alliance, and if Russia is partnering with China and Russia has good relationship with India, we don't know. But one thing is for sure is if these two countries go to war with the West, that's going to affect India one way or another. They're going to have to take a stand. And countries with nukes like that so close to war areas will have to take a stand. They will. I'm sure they'll buy as much time as possible, just like China is doing right now. Try to buy as much time as possible. But when pressure comes, when decision has to be made overnight, where would India lean to? That's why it's important for us to be informed. That's why it's important for us to get information. In the media, we rely on journalism to get that most updated information. So that's why I'm sharing this. All right. Not Iran equal mostly Persian. Yeah, Persian Empire, right? He's been playing that game for a long time. The game of power for a very long time. History repeat itself. The East, when we're talking about the East, all of these people they have some sort of relationship with the past, right? It's not they're more closer together than they are apart. So that could explain to you why USSR would actually put themselves at bay to protect India, because, like you hear, they have a lot of history together, right? And it's right next to them. They're almost neighbors.
Relations between India and Russia remained tepid, even after the creation of the Soviet Union in 1922. And this was largely because Stalin did not think very highly of India, or should I say the leaders of India's independence movement. He thought of them as, quote unquote, running dogs of imperialism, as tools of British and capitalist forces. He considered Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru as agents of counter-revolutionary forces. A staunch communist revolutionary, Stalin viewed their fight for independence as a conspiracy of the bourgeoisie aimed at keeping monopoly capitalism alive. So in 1947, when India became independent, Stalin reacted with open hostility, something he maintained till his death in 1953. India-Russia relations remained cold until then. The ice broke in 1955 under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev. He visited India that year and laid the foundation of an economic partnership. And for the next 6 years, Russia embarked.
That's the key word, guys. That's what makes the world goes. Economy, economic partnership. That changed the game. At the end of the days, guys, is going to be this. If India has to make a decision, the first thing they're going to be look at is economic partnership. Sorry, did I miss any comment? No, I don't think I did. Make sure you hit the like button, guys, as you comment. This is a comment to some reason. Do you mean like comparing China large population versus US? Oh, sorry, my bad. Okay. Like like in this YouTube street, you gotta pick a side. Not necessarily. Sometimes if you don't have to, you don't need to. But if you have to, you know, if you have to, it's you're going to have to. And then what are you going to base that on? What's better for your channel, right? If you have a YouTube you're going to base that on your own economic factors. That's what's going to play the game. It's the economic gains from your decisions, right? So what do you have to lose if you go against the two countries that are surrounding you? Is that going to be a wise decision economic wise? Right? Can you really trust the US all over the Atlantics? Good question. It was a general question. Oh, sorry. All right, let's see. Friends can become enemies. I'm sure we've seen that throughout since World War War to World War II, World War III. At the end of the days, it comes down to economy. That's how friends are made. It comes down to, if you can help me make money, I help you make money. Right? That's how friends are made. Now, if I'm telling you, hey, if you make money with this, I'm going to blow you up, that's going to make you think twice about about joining US, for example, right? If China and Russia, they both focus on India because they see India as a threat, because India is partnering with US, why would India want to go there if it's easier for them to partner with them and then go after US? Like, who knows? We don't know. I don't know, right? I don't know. I don't even. I'm just saying that it's interesting their history, and that's what we're learning with this video here. They've already made partnership in the past for their economic interests. So those ties are strong. So when the moment counts, and what if India says, "I want to repay the debt that the USSR did for them," right? What if they said that? Who knows?
Economic partnership. And for the next 6 years, Russia embarked on what they call de-Stalinization, a process which brought India closer to Russia. Moscow upheld Indian sovereignty in Kashmir, also over Goa, which used to be a Portuguese enclave. Around the same time, a rift emerged between China and Russia. The Chinese began viewing the Soviets with suspicion. They regarded Khrushchev's policies as a revisionist version of communism. Mao decided to disengage with Moscow. So it came as no surprise that in 1962, when India went to war with China, the Soviet Union maintained neutrality. And
India went to war with China. Interesting. But Soviet Union maintained neutrality. All right. Let's see how that goes.
by doing so, it exceeded expectations it was never meant to meet.
Ah. So their expectation was they were afraid that the USSR would have joined forces with China, but because they stayed neutral, they let them fight with each other. And then India is like, all right, you gave us a chance then. Is that what she means?
Moscow's
Wait, let's
Khrushchev's policies as a revisionist version of communism. Mao decided to disengage with Moscow. So it came as no surprise that in 1962, when India went to war with China, the Soviet Union maintained neutrality. And by doing so, it exceeded expectations it was never meant to meet. Moscow's refusal to back China was extremely significant. India began placing more trust in Russia. In 1970, when India conducted its first nuclear test, Washington was critical. It lectured India. In contrast, Moscow stressed on the peaceful nature of the test.
Are you listening, guys? Are you listening, guys? What will India do if we are in a World War III and China and Russia partners, which already are showing itself that they are partnering? According to history, guys, there is a good relationship with Russia, right? So who knows? Who knows? Now we're talking about big country with lots of people and nukes. Hey. Hey. So I don't know, guys. I don't know, but it doesn't sound obvious, is it? It doesn't sound obvious that India will not follow Russia, because in the past they have. Everyone prays all this while doing it. Yes, let's pray so that we can find our ways and navigate through this mess, because gas pricing gas prices rising is going to affect us. If this war expand, it's going to affect our economy, could affect our jobs, could affect our income, could affect our, even if your jobs are good, going to groceries might be an issue now. You might see empty shelves, right? You gotta, some people might be well more better than others, but war is not just like Mr. Peter and Investor MD mentioned the other day. No one really gains out of war, and it's usually the population. It's usually the population that suffers the most, right? At the end of the day, people that leads the country, they are wealthy in costumes. They're signing orders and then sending young people to fight the wars. So it's definitely not a pleasant times coming, but we can only do so much. We can only control so much. And you have to think about your family. You have to think about your wealth, how to protect that, and find ways to make money so that you can pay for stuff and guarantee the well-being of your family during these times. That's why I make these videos, so that we can at least understand what's happening. We can visualize what's coming ahead, estimate the time. And remember, one of the questions I asked earlier, is it a good time to buy the dip? When we see things like this are being formed out here, is it a good time to buy the dip? The dip might just be starting, right? We played a video earlier about Saudi Arabia not responding to Biden's call. Is that a good time to buy the dip? But the other question is, what will India do? What will India do if there is a World War III? World War III, alliance wins war. And right now, there is a clear alliance between China and Russia. Question is, what will India do? If India joins this alliance, it's going to make it even stronger economically, weapon wise. And we're looking at a falling empire, which still has a huge military when it comes to the US. The US has huge military strength. But alliances, you never know.
And India responded in kind. When the world slammed Moscow over its involvement in Hungary and the Czech Republic, India remained quiet. Even after the Soviet Union disintegrated, bilateral ties did not suffer. Yes, there were some ups and downs, but at the end of the day, the logic of geopolitics prevailed. Today, it manifests itself in every sphere.
Really?
Take economy, for instance. Bilateral trade between India and Russia stands at $8.1 billion.
You know what that means, guys? That means if Russia is at war, that seriously affects India's interests, India's economic interests. That's what that means. All right? And when in war times, countries always look at their own interests to make a decisions. Remember what China said last week? They really they stay neutral, but at the same time they say, "Hey, we'll be looking at Chinese interests." And there is some deals with Russia and China, so we'll see. But interesting. Interesting. I didn't even know that, but we're learning.
Bilateral trade between India and Russia stands at $8.1 billion. Indian exports amount to $2.6 billion. Russian imports are at $5.48 billion. By 2025, they plan to take bilateral trade to $25 billion. In politics, both India and Russia collaborate at platforms like the UN, G20, BRICS, and SCO.
As I said earlier, what will India do? What will India do if it comes down to making an alliance? We've already seen collaboration, and they have a deep history in the past since 1971. So we'll see, guys. We'll see. Let's play it. We're learning, right? We're learning.
In fact, it's often said that Russia brought India into the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, in a bid to counter China. Then we come to defense. India is the second largest market for the Russian defense industry. Russia accounts for 68% of India's military hardware import.
Interesting, eh? What will India do? Hey, what will India do if there is a war between Russia and the West? What will India do if Chinese and Russian are partnering and India is right in the middle? How is the war? Is this war is going to affect India's interests? What's going on, Paris Johnson? How are you doing? Yes, I think we did comment earlier. During Cold War, China did not get along, although both were communists. China and who? China and Cold War. I mean, Russia. Wasn't it a different regime back then? This regime that we're seeing now is a bit more capitalist in a way, right? So their interest is different. Their interest is probably more money driven than law driven. This is a wake up call for dependency on oil. Look into future alternative fuel source. That can only go so much right now. That can only go so much. But hey, hopefully that will end. Hopefully that will release those unlimited energy files from Tesla, the real Nikola Tesla, and supply the world with energy. Because at the end of the day, guys, this is what we're looking at right now is an energy war, right? If the entire world would be abundant in energy, and I'm not talking about like electricity, I'm talking about like energy in food, right? Calories is a type of energy that the body needs. If the world was abundant in all types of energy, there would be no war. There would be no need for war, right? Because everyone has it. But when you're fighting on limited resources, and then you're talking about like big empires versus small empires, big empires going to try to get as much as possible. So different stories. I'm sure one of the points Ukraine and Russia is looking at when you look at Ukraine is the land, the agricultural land available in Ukraine. That's going to give so much leverage to Russia and controlled Europeans' action. That's interesting to them, right? With all this, I've been doing a lot more self love and care. Yes, yes, indeed. And beside Russia and USA, India, one of the fastest growing chess grandmaster and master. Like, you mean literally chess or figuratively within this? But hey, yeah, very wise people, man. We'll see.
followed by the United States and Israel. The Indo-Russian Intergovernmental Commission is one of the largest and most comprehensive governmental mechanisms that India has with any country. Almost every department from the government of India attends it. India's foreign secretary recently stated that without Russian spare parts, our ships won't sail and our planes won't fly. Together, India and Russia have launched several joint military programs. Programs to develop state-of-the-art weapons like the BrahMos cruise missile, the Sukhoi fighter jet, the Ilyushin transport aircraft, and the Kamov twin-engine helicopters. India has also purchased and leased all kinds of military hardware from Russia, like the T-90S Bhishma battle tank, the Akula-2 nuclear submarine, the INS Vikramaditya. And how could we not mention the S-400 Triumph, the biggest bone of
What
contention
will
right now
India
between India and
do?
the US? Why is that?
What will India do if there is a war with Russia? What are India's interests? And how is Russian tied to that? What is Russian interest? And how do they need the Chinese? And the enemy or the friends of my friends become, I don't know, other friends? Right? What would India do? But that's interesting. The close tie they have between these two countries. It's almost like Canada versus US. Or not versus. It's almost the same relationship between Canada and US. Right? And I know what Canada would do. Wherever United States goes, Canada would go. Canada would support United States more than they would support England. But so far, they've seen the world the same way. Right? Seems like India and Russia may have a special relationship. Indeed. And that's what I wanted to have this conversation with you, Mrs. Karen, because again, we don't know. We wouldn't know that because if we just stay in the West, if we're just listening to the news, but once you start being exposed to other type of news that will educate you in a different ways, you start having a different perspective. And now it's not that easy to me, at least. It's not that easy to say that India will not join China and Russia, especially Russia, because, hey, just like she said, without spare parts, right? Without the Russian spare parts, our ship won't sail and our plane won't fly. Where are the basically that long-term relationship almost sealed the deal with Russian and and India, making sure that you always have me as a backup. You can count on me, and they proved that back in the days.
You see, in 2018, India struck a $5.5 billion deal with Russia to buy the S-400 air defense system. The first unit is expected to be operational by the end of the year. What is the S-400? One of the most advanced and potent air defense systems in the world. It has the potential of repelling almost all sorts of aerial attacks.
Really?
India needs the S-400 in order to protect itself from the growing threats from China and Pakistan. So why is the US upset?
Notice, eh? India needs this weapon to protect themselves from who? Pakistan, but also who? China. But what if they come up with a deal? You see, that's where politics comes in, geopolitics, right? What if so India has a problem with China, but India has great relationship with Russia. But let's say there is a war. India is neutral. Russian and Chinese, they need the help of India. China won't say it out loud, but secretly they know they might need their help. And then let's say Russia comes to India and be like, I need your help. So India is in a situation, I'll help you if you deal with this guy here. If you deal with this guy, China, I'll help you. That's like something on an afternoon, you solve the problem right then and there. Boom, alliance is made. All right? That's how you solve problems like this. Leverage. You got a problem, but there is a common point that we can agree on. Solve this problem like this overnight. Especially when you have built a relationship like this over the years. It doesn't seem that your USA and India have that type of relationship, is it? Right? Seems like India and Russia may have a special relationship. I agree. The West neglected, Peter Investor M, the West neglected India as a partner because their focus were on China. Interesting. And it wasn't a focus to really partnering with China. It was more like a focus to use them, but also limit them. Right? It was more like a business partnership, but at the same time, let me keep my eyes on you so that you don't expand too much because you're a threat to my empire. Right? This makes me go, exactly. That's why I wanted to make this stream so that we can elaborate it and think about it and explore it. And now that you wouldn't see this in the Western media, you wouldn't see, you would barely hear anything about India. But India is also a large area, big, lots of resources, new country, and a close tie with Russia. I believe previous U.S. administration were trying to get closer economic ties with India, possibly, but now is that my conclusion is USA and Canada should just mind their business. We stay on our side. However, here let them in the East figure it out. Yes, that's what we should do. But are we doing that? The reason why India increased a tie to Russia is because the reason why India increased tie to Russia is because the USA were more involved with Pakistan. Oof. Thank you. I didn't know that. Now, as we're talking, right? What would India do if there is a conflict that happens? It escalates. World War III in a corner. Russia and China are deep into it, and India needs to make a decision. Are they going to side with the person that is funding their enemy, or are they going to side the person that's protect them from their enemy? Let's finish this.
Well, multiple reasons. One, the US wants India to end its reliance on Russian weapons.
Of course.
More importantly, in 2017, the US Congress passed a law called CATSA, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. CATSA. The aim of this law was to counter American adversaries like Iran, Russia, and North Korea, also to sanction the countries who deal with them. In 2020, the US imposed sanctions on Turkey, its long-standing NATO ally, because Turkey bought the S-400 from Russia. In January this year, a US congressional report warned that if India buys the S-400, it will be sanctioned too. And despite the pressure, India went ahead with the deal. Reports say India will get a waiver on CATSA.
What? Even India has balls. They're going against the US already. But you see how the US rules? That doesn't sound like you want to make a deal. You're ruling with sanctions. Tarif. Right? US is going, Russia is going through sanctions. Even India is trying to protect themselves from Pakistan. Is going through sanctions. And look at that. Because of their alliance and partnership, they're going bull with it.
A one-time exception, despite the pressure, warned that if bought the
remember what we gotta listen to the
American
news.
Adversaries like Iran, Russia, and North Korea.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. Let me rewind it back. CATSA, right? Countering America's adversaries through sanctions. Hey, who those sanctions are for? Anyone else that's not playing ball.
Its reliance on Russian weapons. More importantly, in 2017, the US Congress passed a law called CATSA, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CATSA. The aim of this law was to counter American adversaries like Iran, Russia, and North Korea, also to sanction the countries who deal with them. In 2020, the US imposed sanctions on Turkey, its long-standing NATO ally, because Turkey bought the S-400 from Russia. In January this year, a US congressional report warned that if India buys the S-400, it will be sanctioned too. Well, despite the pressure, India went ahead with the deal. Reports say India will get a waiver on CATSA, a one-time exception. Now, these are just reports. The fact is that the US cannot afford to sanction a strategic partner and a major market like India. The S-400 deal is expected to feature in the talks between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin.
Look at that. What is this? Yo, what is this? What will India do if World War III breaks out and Russia and China are partnering? Eh?
Here's another subject they cannot miss: China. You see, Russia's perception of and relationship with China is changing. Moscow may not admit it, but there's a growing asymmetry in its ties with Beijing.
It is.
At the same time, Russia's economic dependence on China is the highest ever. China is increasingly gaining an upper hand over Russia. It is overshadowing Russian investments in Central Asia. It is diluting Moscow's economic and military institutions, diminishing its importance as the most potent communist force. Simply put, Russia's dominance is beginning to erode in the face of China's growing belligerence. And it is aware of this weakening position, but has decided to deal with it rather carefully, with ice cream diplomacy even. The circumstances compel Russia to do so. China remains its best bet in countering the US, so picking a fight with Beijing does not help. As for India, Russia suspects that India could move closer to the US orbit, into the US orbit, especially after the formation of the Quad.
Wait. Let me see. Let's hear that back. Let's hear that back because, hey, see, that's what I'm saying. We're getting sides, we're getting variations, right? It allows us to take. But let's hear that.
Beijing does not help. As for India, Russia suspects that India could move closer to the US orbit, into the US orbit, especially after the formation of the Quad, which it perceives as a threat to its own interests. Simply put, Russia sees itself in a state of siege. China's growing ambitions and America's ever-expanding alliances are challenging Moscow. At a time like this, Russia wants to reassure itself if it can still regard India as a friend and not just as a defense customer. So when Vladimir Putin comes to New Delhi, his aim will be not just to sustain the traditional ties, but further deepen bilateral partnership, draw the nations together, and chalk out a path for a shared future.
Now, remember when this video came out, guys? December 5th, when Ozzy was gearing up for war. Okay? As he was gearing up for war, he was shaking hands with and making sure that he can rely on his partners. Now, doesn't mean anything. Let's say India say, you know what, you go to war, we'll support you if we have to. Tomorrow he might change their mind. Who knows? But at the end of the day, are you going to support the person that's been, or the country, the entity that's been supporting you for years, helping you funding you in arms so that you can protect yourself against your own enemies, has close ties with China, which also is rising in power, and China at some point might need Russia, even though right now it doesn't seem that way? Or you're going to partner with the West that's been sanctioning you when you were trying to defend yourself, right? That is far away. By the time China decide to invade you, the invasion already happened. By the time the U.S. ship starts leaving the port, at least they can use their other military base all around the world to get closer to India. But will they do that for you? Will they do that for you? Who knows? I don't know. But all I know is if there is a war, in war there are alliances. Alliance win wars. China alone cannot fight the US. No matter how much economic power China has right now, military-wise, China cannot play ball. China and Russia still might be not enough just to fight the US in terms of military power. But now we're talking about more nukes. But China, India, Russia, Iran, you got a deal like that, and then you go talk to North Korea. Whew. Against NATO. That's where we're heading, guys. That's where we're heading. Let's see what you guys have to say. We've been going on for a while. But let's see. Bottom line, nobody in the East likes America. Indeed. I wouldn't say that. India are very reasonable people, right? They're Chinese are clearly going after the US neck. And it's not just because they don't hate them, it's because they want what they have. The empire. They want to they want to dominate the world. I'm sure they've been pissed off that they didn't travel and conquer the world when the European were doing so. Now the European have settlement all around the world, and Chinese were playing the power game for many years and they didn't do any of that. So they're pissed. And now there's like let's catch what's left around the world, Africa. Let's go and conquer that. And that's what they're working on right now. They don't really hate the US. It's more like they want what the US have. India is just, it is what it is. You poke me here, maybe I'll poke you there. But let's talk first. Let's reason. Let's not be so hasty. But if you poke him too much, at some point, they're going to be looking at their interests. And they're very wise people, They like to bargain their way out of conflict. Mad respect for the East, man. I honestly do. There were a lot of wise people there. Oh, geez, their best friend Putin in. Oh, Lord. You saw that hug, eh? Yeah, they were hugging. They are key strategic partner, military versus economy. Yes. Key strategic partnership. Military versus economic. And in the East side, I argue that they can make a partnership in both military and economic. First, we had CV19. Second, lockdown. Third, job loss. C19 shot, homes loss, and the list goes on. 2020 had been an interesting ride. Yeah, and now we're having we had this earlier also this year with Omicron, and also right after seems that I have a picture to show you guys. Let me show you guys as I close this stream. I'll show you. I saved this picture to share with you today, and I forgot to share it. But just reminding me, your question just reminding me this. Yeah, there you go. Look at this, guys. Look at this. If you guys play soccer, there is a substitution. As this is a French. It basically means the great substitution. And then in the soccer field, you always have these arrows to show who's going to leave the field and then who's going to replace them. And as CV19 is leaving, clapping his hands to Putin. Putin is walking in. This is the new distractions. But as this distraction happen, what is happening? It's more money being printed to inflate the markets, to postpone the inevitable crash. And at this point now, we're talking about a potential global depression. Right? But the great substitution. All of a sudden, overnight, you don't hear about any news on the CV19. All you hear about is Putin and his evil act, right? But today we listen to the other side to bring balance to this conversation, but for the purpose of not just fair news, but also to understand, to have a better sense of the scope, of the timeline, of the scale of this conflict. And now this conflict, which is a conflict just between two countries, has the potential to escalate to possibly a World War III. This is the scale that we're looking at right now. We're already feeling the impacts of this conflict 3 weeks in our pockets every day. Gas prices are rising now. Next month, food prices will take a jump. They already been rising. They will be rising even higher. So, with that said, guys, this is what I wanted to talk about you for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being active in the chat and listening carefully to the videos that we had to share today to talk about the are we already in a World War III? But hey, we cover a lot. These action that has been happening in the last 3 weeks, I've been building up for years. We've seen videos all over 2015 predicting exactly what was happening right now. And also this setting right now, because when we never know when the World War starts. It's usually after it starts, maybe a year or two, then you know you're in a World War. But right now, we have the potential of if we were ever close to a World War III, now will be the time. Now I'm telling you, I love astrology, and based on astrology, there would be no better time to start a World War III than 2 days after one of the most significant day of our century, probably on many centuries to come, uh, 22nd of February 2022. And then there's also numerology things with the two World War with 24, February 24, 2022. I don't know. I have just a bad feeling about this. And all I got to say is get ready to buckle up. This is an economic winter, to say the least. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, the gas prices were $70 per barrel, less than $70 per barrel. Now, last weekend, they rose all the way to $130 per barrel. I made a video short about that. Make sure you tune in and hit the like button also on your way in of these videos. But these are economic winters, to say the least. And when countries feels desperate, that's when they start talking about nukes. When countries feel desperate, they become more aggressive. And sanctions are another tools to incentivize countries to be more aggressive. All right. So we've seen a culture of go woke, not just from the U.S. Army or the U.S. leadership, but also the U.S. companies leaving Russia. And usually go woke leads to getting broke. And this time we're looking at the scale for the entire world, not just us, not just wherever the conflict is happening. We're seeing that in our pockets right now. And if this escalates worse, we'll see that in the stock market. We'll see that in crypto. We'll see that in commodities. The question is now is where should you allocate your money? Right? This will be the conversation we'll be having next. Talking about we talk about how to ride the bear market. I already made a stream about that, but we'll have conversation like that more and more because you gotta buckle up, guys. It seems that we might be in here for a while. But one thing is clear: we're already leading towards the definition of a recession. This conflict does not show any signs that it's slowing down in the near future. And if this continue long enough, will eventually lead to 6 months of economic downturns. And that means recessions. We already are having recessions indicators triggering. If you're watching recession indicators, they're already triggering, telling you that, hey, we're close to a recession. But this time, if the bubble bursts, it's not just going to be the stock bubble. It's not just going to be the real estate bubble. It's not just going to be the bond bubble, right? The repo bubble. It's not just going to be bubbles on cryptocurrencies, meme coins. It's going to be the everything bubble. Everything bubble, and that could burst. And if that bursts, it's going to have serious impact on the economy, which will indirectly affect your wealth if you're not prepared for it. So get ready for it, prepare for it, learn how to benefit from it, look for investments to do that in times of bear markets. Focus a lot on fundamentals. This morning I made a post on my general chat on Discord. Make sure you join the Discord channel. And I also created a Telegram channel too. I'll start promoting that later, but you can join me on Telegram as well. Often on my phone, so that you can have direct access to me if you're in the Telegram group. And yes, Discord and Telegram, I just made a post about it this morning. Someone was asking what's the best way to play the game, especially when talking about the potentially crash of the US dollar. We talked about that earlier today, about how Saudi Arabia is not even responding to the calls. That started a rumor saying that, hey, we might lose the US dollar as the reserve currency. And that's been a rumor going on right now since this morning, since yesterday night. So who knows? So you gotta get ready. You gotta get ready. Can you control on where you allocate your pension fund? Can you take measures so that you can preserve the purchase power? Can you control your investment and allocate on what stocks you want to buy? Maybe gold stocks might be a pretty good idea. Silver stocks might be a pretty good idea. But better than that would be actual physical metal. Can you pair that with cryptocurrencies, for example? I'll be making videos about that too. And maybe Bitcoin might be also another good idea. Lands. Because eventually, if a currency falls, people will always gravitate towards what's valuable and the needs. Farmlands. If you can get your hands on that, go ahead. If not, join a fund that invests in that. All things like this are not, when things like this are coming, it's not good to really go for speculation. It's more to put more of your portfolio and investments for long term, but that are strong in fundamentals. And you want to make sure that the fundamental won't change even though there is a war, right? If you're providing food, whether there is a war or not, people will still need food. If you have farmlands, it's better than a mall, right? A bomb can destroy the mall. Or maybe if people are unemployed, they won't buy as often, and that will limit your profit. But a farm where you produced it will always find it will always find a use case for it. That unless the bomb also destroy that. But we don't want to think that deep, that dark. Let's hope that world will rise through this. Let's hope the common sense reach to our leaders. Let's hope the Sleepy Joe wakes up. And let's hope Miss Palki Sharma keep grilling people that needs to be grilled, both Putin and Biden. And let's hope a fast resolution to all this, that it doesn't end up to a world war. But like I always say, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And with that, say good night. And I will see you on next episode.
Hey, it's all about wealth engineering. Might be something that you're not used to. It's okay, cause I'm here to introduce you to concepts. Time to grow and make big moves. All about crypto, come see. Stocks and business, yes indeed. Got the info that you need. Hosted by my homie JC. Hey, yeah. Wealth engineering. Stacking and stacking it up. It's time to generate wealth till you living like